I've worked as a nurse in Germany for a few years now. When I was offered the night shift last year, it seemed like a dream come true. I was surprised to get the job in the first place, because I had just finished my training, and the opportunity was too good to pass up. The environment was good, and the pay was more than enough to convince me to accept the job. The only downside to it was I lived more than an hour away, but it wasn't that bad since there was a train that took me from right outside my door to just a few kilometers away from my workplace, which I could easily reach by bus in under 12 minutes. I had to take the train almost 2 hours before my shift, so I had to wake up very, very early every day. This also meant that I had to go to sleep early, which was also challenging since my shifts were long, as was the ride back home. The first 2 years of my job were a nightmare. I felt like I was losing all day and night, and my sole purpose was to live, eat, sleep, and work. And sometimes eating was only optional. Then I was offered the night shift, and all my problems seemed to vanish. To be fair, as a young woman who, in my opinion, wasn't too bad looking, I had a few scary encounters with perverts or drunks who catcalled me or even followed me. But the bus station wasn't far, and I found myself enjoying the silence of the night. I could sleep in, spend my day however I wanted, and then leave for my night shift once everything was done. It kind of felt like I had the perfect work-life balance, which probably sounds stupid to others with better schedules, but as a starting nurse, having a few hours to myself was an absolute gift. At least, it was until tonight. It had been a long, hard night. 2 of the older patients had heart attacks almost simultaneously. Thankfully, they both survived, although the next few hours were very stressful nonetheless. After clocking out a little later than usual, I decided I would sleep all day as soon as I reached my bed. "Come on," I muttered under my breath, watching the bus stop at what was probably the 5th red light in a row. I checked my watch and cursed when I realized I would miss my train. The next train wouldn't arrive for an hour. As soon as the bus stopped, I ran as fast as I could, even though I knew the train was long gone. When I reached the train tracks, it was empty. No surprise. On the verge of tears from exhaustion and annoyance, I stared at my phone's train app, which showed that my next train had left on time for probably the first time ever in German history. Exhausted, I sat down on a nearby bench and closed my eyes for just a moment. When I opened them, I saw a train right in front of me. I almost jumped from how sudden it was. It was as if the train appeared out of nowhere, without any sound. Since I was so tired, I figured I'd fallen asleep and just slept through its arrival. I checked the display, but no train was supposed to arrive for at least 30 minutes. The train app also hadn't indicated that there would be a train anytime soon. Maybe it was just the exhaustion that clouded my judgment, or maybe it was the fact that I was alone on the side of the tracks in the middle of the night, which made it really easy for someone to rob me, or worse. So I stood up, picked up my bag, and walked toward the train. Suddenly, a hand gripped my arm as I was about to step through the doors, startling me so much that I let out a shriek of surprise. When I turned to look at its owner, I was met with the face of a homeless man, with a filthy odor and a crazy look in his eye. I hadn't even seen him in the darkness. Over his shoulder, I could see the spot he had probably built up for the night. "You can't go in there," the man stuttered, or more accurately, spat at me. Disgusted, I tried to rip my arm away from his clammy hands. He gripped them tighter and started shouting, "You'll never get out! They never do!" while trying to pull me away from the doors that miraculously hadn't closed yet, as if it was waiting for me. "Is there a problem?" a woman around my age suddenly asked from inside the train. She looked at us. I noticed she was wearing a big smile and a train uniform. "This is the devil's work. None of this is real," the man continued. The woman's smile seemed to widen as she calmly answered, "This woman chose this train and would like to enter it. Now please, let her go." The man stopped ripping at my jacket and finally let me go. He spun around, spat at the woman's feet, and left, his leg trailing behind him slightly. The woman, still smiling, turned to me and gestured for me to come inside. Before entering, I asked, just to be sure, if this train stopped in my town. even though I knew my home was on the route of all trains going this way. The smiling woman nodded and said, "This train will take you home, dear," in a soft, melodic voice. Yet, her never-ending smile kinda creeped me out. It should have been the first red flag. I was relieved to finally be in a warm and comfortable space. I took one of the empty seats and quickly realized that this train's interior was unlike any I'd ever seen in this town. First, the seats were much more comfortable than usual. Secondly, and more importantly, every seat was clean. They weren't just freshly cleaned, more likely like they had never been used before. A quick scan of the surroundings confirmed that the entire train was unnaturally clean. There was even a faint floral scent in the air, and it was completely different from the normal smell of sweat and urine in trains. I chalked it up to being a new kind of train that was about to be introduced and tested only at night. I checked my phone, which read 3:30 a.m. Just as the train started moving, my phone died. I stared blankly at it, pretty sure it had shown 27% just a few minutes earlier. I sighed in defeat, and I closed my eyes for a few moments of sleep. Surprisingly, it was a very relaxing sleep, not cut abruptly by the train stopping or an announcement about the next stop. I jumped from my seat. Had I overslept my stop? I tried to look through the window for a clue of how far we were, but it was pitch black outside. You couldn't even see a single tree moving, as we were still speeding along the tracks. I checked the display above me, hoping to see my stop among the next few. Instead, I was met with black displays, just like my phone. The displays were pitch black and showing no signs that they had ever worked. My heart started beating faster as I finally got the feeling that something was horribly wrong with this train. I stood up abruptly and made my way through the train, hoping to find the woman from before or another passenger. But I didn't see anyone. At least 10 minutes passed as I walked down the empty rows of seats. My watch still seemed to be stuck on 3:30 a.m., exactly the time the train started moving. A few minutes later, I began to wonder why I hadn't encountered any other passengers. Sure, it was the middle of the night, but surely I wasn't the only person heading home from a night shift, or even on their way to catch an early flight. More importantly, I started to question why I hadn't reached the end of the train. It was almost as if the train had no end, but that would be impossible. By that point, I started walking faster and faster, until I was sprinting down the seemingly never-ending wagon. I shouted, "Hello? Is anyone there?" I was desperately hoping for an answer. I didn't hear one, although I wasn't sure if I could hear anything over the loud beating of my heart. Tears started streaming down my face, joining snot on the way down my chin. When I finally slowed down, I was gasping for breath from both the running and the crying. Sob after sob escaped my lips as my lungs screamed at me to stop. My bag hit the floor with a small thump, followed by my knees. The floor was the cleanest I had ever seen. I was consumed by dread and horror as I realized something. I was never going to leave. I was trapped. Hunched over, I shook, sobbed, and gasped painfully when a soft, raspy voice above me asked, "What's wrong, my child?" The question made me choke on my own sob. I blinked rapidly, trying to clear my vision, and finally saw the first human in what felt like an eternity. It was an older woman, smiling sympathetically at me. My, don't you worry. This pain will be gone in no time." She helped me from the floor and led me to a seat where she sat me down, leaving my bag behind. She pulled out a tissue from her yellow cardigan, which was hanging loosely over a pretty floral dress. An interesting choice for a train ride. I cleared my throat and croaked, What's going on? Why isn't this train stopping?" I was surprised at how hoarse my voice sounded. The woman smiled as she calmly answered, "It will stop when it reaches its destination. I'm finally going to see my daughter after so many years." Answering my question only partially. Nevertheless, I was thankful, as it promised me a stop somewhere in the future. The fear in my heart seemed to shrink a little, but it was still there, clinging to me like an upset stomach. "Did you two grow apart?" I asked as I blew my nose loudly with the tissue. The woman sighed sadly and said, You could say that. Staring at her hands. Her whole demeanor changed and my heart ached. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude," I sniffled. The woman just shook her head and whispered, "That's fine, my child. She was just so young when it happened." My brows furrowed. "I don't understand," I said slowly. The woman looked up at me with her old, sad eyes and said, "My daughter died when she was 7. It was a car accident. A drunk man ran her over and drove away before I could react." My voice lost as I managed to say, "What?" The woman only smiled at me as I looked at her in horror. "What do you mean? How can you visit her if she's dead?" My voice quivered and rose as I asked. A horrifying thought started to form in my head. The woman's eyes widened, and now she was the one who looked at me in horror. "My God, why are you on this train, child?" she asked. Her question gave me the energy to surge up from my seat beside her and run through the train once again, screaming, "I want out! I want out! Please, please let me out!" It had been hours, maybe even days since I started talking with the old woman. I had lost track of time as I pounded on doors and windows, trying to break them open. Nothing seemed to work. My voice was broken, and so was I. I was lying on the floor, shaking uncontrollably when the woman in uniform that I had met when I first boarded appeared in front of me. I hadn't seen or even heard her coming. She looked down at me, smiling that big, creepy smile. "It seems we made a mistake, miss. You aren't supposed to come with us yet. Please leave." As she said this, the doors down the corridor opened slowly. I ran to the door faster than I had ever before, afraid that I might close again and trap me in this hell. As soon as I felt the fresh air, I laughed. Then I cried, fell to the dirty floor and cried even harder. I sat there for a long time until I realized the train had left, along with my work bag. But I didn't care. I was alive. I pulled out my phone, which magically worked again, and checked the time. It was 3:31 a.m. It was as if nothing had ever happened. I looked up and someone walked up to me, their footsteps light and unsure. I looked up and saw the homeless man who had tried to stop me from getting on the train. Somehow I was back where my journey started. Too afraid to get on a train after what I just survived, I called a friend to pick me up. They weren't happy to be awoken at this hour, but after hearing how shaken up I was, they agreed to come. I sat at the train station and watched trains come and go, silently typing this down. I want to warn you, if you ever see a train that shouldn't exist, or isn't on any schedules, don't get on it. It just might be the last one you ever get on, and it almost was for me. Wherever this train was headed, it wasn't on Earth anymore. I don't know if it arrives at the same time every day, or if it was just a coincidence that it stopped for me. Either way, I don't want to know. I'm just glad to have survived. When I was a kid, my mom kept a heavy leather photo album on the coffee table. Thick black pages, plastic sleeves, Polaroids tucked between brittle corners. I used to flip through it when she was cooking or when I was supposed to be doing homework. Back then, I thought of it as proof that our family was normal. Birthdays, Christmas mornings, summer trips to the lake. Mundane and ordinary, but comforting. I didn't notice him at first. Why would I? When you're 7 years old, you don't scan every photo like a detective. You look for your face, your siblings, the dog. But years later, when I was visiting home after college, I picked up the books again. Nostalgia, I guess. And that's when I saw him. He's in every photo, but not in a way that jumps out immediately. Sometimes he's in the background, leaning against a tree. Other times he's at the edge of the frame, blurred by motion. In one, he's sitting 2 rows back at my 5th birthday party, in the McDonald's play place seating area, staring directly into the camera. The strange thing is, I don't know him. My parents don't know him. I asked my mom, laughing at first, flipping the album around to show her. Who is this guy? He's everywhere. Look, he's behind Aunt Claire in the Christmas photo, then again at the lake, and here at the carnival. She took the book from me. Her fingers froze on the page. That's just some stranger, she finally said, snapping the cover shut. You know how people wander into pictures? He probably just a coincidence. But her tone wasn't casual. She put the album back on the shelf and didn't let me look at it again that night. I couldn't stop thinking about it though. I lay in my childhood bedroom staring at the ceiling, trying to reconstruct the photos in my head. He wasn't family. He wasn't a friend. He didn't even seem to age. His hair was always the same length, the same style. His clothes never really changed. The more I thought about it, the more I realized he wasn't just in the background. He was looking, always at the camera, and always at us. And now I can't shake the thought. If he's in every picture, then he was there, at every moment, every holiday, every trip, every birthday, standing close enough to be caught on film, which means he was always near us, watching. The next morning I brought it up again. Mom, seriously, who was that guy in the photos? You knew everyone else at those parties. The neighbors, family, friends. Why didn't anyone ever mention him? She didn't look at me. She stirred her cup with this slow, deliberate rhythm, like she was buying herself time. Finally, she said, "You're overthinking it. Just someone passing through. People photobomb all the time." But her voice cracked when she said photobomb. I knew better than to push. My mom has that way of shutting a conversation down, pressing her lips together so tight you can hear the finality in it. Still, she left for work. I went back to the bookshelf and pulled out the album. I sat cross-legged on the floor, turning pages carefully, like the paper might disintegrate in my own hands. There he was, always there. Christmas '94, behind the tree, only half of his face is visible in the branches. Family reunion in '97, across the picnic field, sitting alone on a bench. My high school graduation, dead center in the bleachers, eyes locked on the camera. It wasn't just that he was in the photos, it was that he didn't change. The same dark jacket, the same haircut, the same posture, straight-backed, hands clasped loosely in the front. My uncle had gone from full head of hair to bald at this point. My cousins had grown taller, acne giving way to clearer skin. Even the damn dog had aged, but not him. I tried to be logical. Maybe it was just some old family friend, someone I just didn't remember. Maybe Mom was embarrassed or they had had a falling out. That would explain the secrecy and the tone in her voice. But it didn't explain the lack of aging. I decided to test it. I pulled one of the Polaroids from its sleeve. It was of my 7th birthday. I took a magnifying glass from the drawer and studied the man in the background. The resolution was grainy, colors faded, but his expression was clear, neutral, almost pleasant. His eyes, though, his eyes seemed too sharp for the cheap film. I compared it to the photo from my high school graduation. Same eyes, same expression. The only thing that changed was how much closer he was. At the birthday, he was near the back wall of the play place. At graduation, he was right there in the middle of the crowd. Closer. That word stuck in my head all night. When I called my dad about it, hoping he'd laugh and give me some old forgotten story, he got quiet instead. Then he asked me to stop asking questions. His exact words were, "Don't dig into it. Let it go. It's for your own good." That's when I knew it wasn't a coincidence, and that's when I decided I had to know. So I scanned the photos, every single one that had him in it. Then I uploaded them to a facial recognition site, one of those free trial tools. I sat there, chewing my nails, watching the little spinning wheel as the site combed through public databases. When the results came back, it wasn't a name. It wasn't anything at all. Just an error message. Face not recognized. No matches found. I tried again with another site. Same result. And another. Same thing. It was like he didn't exist, but I know he does. I can see him in front of me, because when I closed my laptop, my reflection in the dark screen wasn't alone. For a half second, just over my shoulder, I swear I saw him standing there. After that incident, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house felt amplified. Every shadow stretched too long. I ended up dragging the photo album upstairs to my old bedroom, setting it on the desk like it was some kind of evidence file. I told myself I was going to prove he wasn't what I thought. There had to be some explanation to this. But the photos didn't stay the same. The first time I noticed, it was subtle. A snapshot from our trip to Niagara Falls. My dad holding me on his shoulders, water spraying in the background. I remembered that photo pretty clearly because Dad had a goofy plastic poncho on. But now, the man was standing behind us. He wasn't in the original. I know he wasn't. He was closer than he'd ever been before, his face angled, just enough that both of his eyes were visible. And this time, he was smiling. Not a friendly smile, more like someone holding back a secret. I flipped to another photo, my 8th grade science fair. The man had been in the back row before, blurry between parents. Now his head tilted just slightly toward me, his mouth open like he had just spoken. I felt sick. My palms started sweating, pages sticking as I turned faster and faster. Every picture had shifted, not in obvious ways, nothing dramatic, nothing that would scream altered, just little things. A glance, a lean. The man's body turned ever so slightly toward me, like he was aware I was looking at him. I shut the book and shoved it under my bed, but that didn't help. Because the images were burned into my brain, I kept thinking about his eyes, sharp, almost too sharp, the way they seemed to cut through the blur of cheap cameras. That night, I dreamed I was flipping through the album again, but instead of birthdays or vacations, every page was a photo of me, right there in my room, taken from just outside the window. And every one, the man was closer, 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 until the last photo was nothing but his face. I woke up gasping, heart thudding, like it wanted out of my chest. The album was back on my desk. I know I shoved it under the bed. I remember the scrape of cardboard against the carpet, but there it was, sitting upright, open to the graduation photo. And this time, the man wasn't in the crowd. He was standing on stage, next to me. After that, I stopped pretending this was nostalgia. Something was wrong, deeply, horribly wrong. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell anyone. What could I even say? Hey, remember that stranger in every childhood memory we have? Well, he's moving closer now. Yeah, that'd go over really well. Instead, I tried to ignore it. I shoved the album into the closet and stacked board games on top of it. Out of sight and out of mind. Except it wasn't. The man started showing up outside the photos. It began with the bathroom mirror. I had just finished brushing my teeth when I saw him standing at the very edge of the reflection, where the doorway met the hall. I spun around so fast I nearly dropped the toothbrush. Nobody was there, and the hallway was empty. When I looked back, so was the mirror. The next time it was worse. I was in the kitchen late at night, having a drink of water. The window above the sink looked out into the backyard. Dark, empty, nothing but trees. Except, it wasn't empty. A figure was standing at the tree line, perfectly still. I didn't need the details to know it was him. The posture was the same, straight-backed, hands folded, waiting. I backed away, heart hammering, telling myself it was just a trick of the dark, some shadow, but when I blinked, his head tilted, slow, deliberate, like he knew I was watching. I yanked the curtains shut and didn't open them again. From then on, reflections betrayed me. Every dark screen, every pane of glass, I'd see him behind me. Just far enough that I couldn't make out all the details, but I felt him. The weight of the gaze pressed down like a hand on my shoulder. I started covering mirrors. I unplugged the TV. I left the laptop lid closed. Still, I couldn't escape him. Because he wasn't just showing up in the house anymore. He was interacting with the album. One night, I heard rustling from the closet. Soft, like pages turning. I froze in bed, every muscle locking. The sound went on for a minute, then stopped. When I finally forced myself to look, the closet door was cracked open. The board games I'd stacked on top of the album were scattered across the floor, and the album itself was lying open, pages fluttering as if from a breeze. I crept closer, every instinct screaming to stop, and I saw what page it had landed on. Not a childhood memory, not a holiday. It was a photo I'd never seen before. Me, sitting in my bed, right now. And in the bottom corner of the frame, half in shadow, the man was standing inside my room. I couldn't take it anymore. The album, the photos changing, the man pressing into my house. None of it made sense. There had to be an explanation, some missing piece. So I finally confronted my mom. She was in the living room, folding laundry, when I dropped the album on the coffee table. The thud made her flinch. She looked at it like I just set down a dead animal. "Tell me who he is," I demanded. My voice shook, but I didn't care. "The man, he's in every picture, and don't tell me it's a coincidence, because he's in ones that didn't even exist before." Her hands tightened on a towel until her knuckles went white. She didn't answer. "Mom," I pressed, "please just tell me the truth." Finally, she set the towel down and sank onto the couch. For the first time in my life, she looked old, tired, like she'd been holding something in for decades, and it had finally rotted her from the inside out. "I hope you wouldn't notice," she whispered. "We all hoped." My skin went cold. "We?" She nodded slowly. "Your grandmother, your uncle, your father, and me. We never talk about him. That's the rule. You don't say his name. You don't point him out. You don't acknowledge him. Because if you do, he notices you back." Her eyes glistened. She looked at me the way someone looks at a terminal patient, grief already there. "Why is he in our pictures?" I asked. Mom shook her head. "He's always been in our family. Always. As far back as the albums go. Every generation, he's there. Weddings, funerals, baptisms. Sometimes he's just a blur. Sometimes he's closer." She covered her mouth like she regretted saying that much. I leaned forward. "What does he want?" Her hand dropped into her lap, and she didn't answer. "Mom," my voice cracked. "What does he want?" She whispered it so faintly I almost didn't hear. "He chooses." I felt sick. Chooses what? Her eyes darted to the album. Who stays and who doesn't? My stomach turned. Suddenly, pieces clicked together that I'd never questioned before. My cousin Danny, who disappeared when I was 10. The way relatives never talked about him. The empty chair at holidays nobody mentioned. I remembered once when I was little, asking about him. My grandmother had snapped, "We don't talk about Danny." I thought it was grief, but now I wondered if it was fear. Because when I flipped to the family reunion photo, the one where we'd all gathered at the park, I noticed something I hadn't before. Danny was in that photo, smiling, holding a frisbee. But in the copy I held now, he wasn't. The man was standing in his place. I couldn't breathe. Danny wasn't in the photo anymore. Just gone. Erased like he had never existed. And the man, standing where he had been, looked sharper than ever, clearer than anyone else in the picture. I slammed the photo album shut and backed away. "Mom, we can't just ignore this. He's here. He's here." She wouldn't look at me. "The more you fight, the faster it happens. You've already seen too much." "What happens?" Her eyes filled with tears and she shook her head. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart." That's when I heard it. A click. The unmistakable sound of a camera shutter. Faint, coming from somewhere inside the house. I froze. "Did you hear that?" Mom's face crumpled. "He's already chosen." I spun towards the sound. The hallway was empty, shadows stretching long. My pulse roared in my ears as I crept toward my bedroom. The album was waiting for me on the desk. Open, pages fluttering, although there was no breeze. Another click. I looked down. There on the fresh page was a new Polaroid, still developing. The chemical haze fading into an image. Me, standing in the hallway, just moments before. Behind me in the photo, the man was closer than ever. Not blurred, not distant. His hand was outstretched, almost touching my shoulder. Click. Another Polaroid slid into the page by itself. This one showed me staring at the photo I was holding. My own face pale, horrified, and behind me, no longer reaching, he was gripping my shoulder. I dropped the book and stumbled back, heart slamming against my ribs. The lights flickered, and then the mirror across the room began to ripple. Not even like glass breaking, but like water. Like something was pressing through. A hand emerged first. Pale, thin, fingers too long. They pressed against the glass, then curled around the frame. I couldn't move. My legs locked as his face pushed forward, stretching the surface until it tore open with a sound like wet fabric ripping. He stepped through. He was exactly as he appeared in every photo. Dark jacket, neat hair, expression calm. Only now he was inches away. "Why?" My voice sounded tiny and useless. He tilted his head, studying me with those sharp, unblinking eyes. And then, slowly, deliberately, he raised the old camera hanging from his neck. Click. The flash blinded me. For a second I saw nothing, just white. When my vision cleared, I wasn't in my room anymore. I was in the photo album. I could see my mom standing over the book, crying. I could see my own face, frozen mid-scream, trapped behind the glossy surface. And behind me, already stepping into the frame, was the man. Closer. Always getting closer. I lost my job last year after my divorce. My ex-wife's father owned the company. He let me go down with a modest severance package. It was a dark time. For about 6 months I drank, morning until night. A slow, pathetic suicide. It's harder than it seems. Killing yourself, I mean. Every morning I'd wake up like some malfunctioning phoenix. I just wanted it to be over, to descend into sweet darkness and feel nothing. Then, in September, my debit card was declined. That sound, that scratch the machine made, indicating I had no money. That even amongst my derelict peers, I was on the bottom. I began to look for jobs. Any jobs. I found one on Craigslist. Substitute teacher, gifted/special education. I had never been a kid person. Don't like them, don't hate them, but I was desperate. Driving through the long, winding road to the school was like being transported in time. Jeffersonian buildings evoked a Virginian antebellum aesthetic. Tall, majestic oaks lent their shadows in the summer heat. Everyone in the area knew the school. Private, elite. Graduates went to Yale, Harvard. 2 vice presidents and 1 speaker of the House were alumni. My Camry felt out of place in the parking lot, but like I said, I was desperate. When I walked in, the receptionist looked at me knowing. "You here for the substitute teaching job?" I nodded. "Come with me." She walked down a long hall, and I followed. We stopped at a large, industrial door with a keypad. The numbers beeped, echoing down the hall as she typed in a code. An airlock whooshed as the door opened and steps down into an underground area. She stopped at the top of the stairs, motioning for me to continue down. "This is as far as I go." I hesitated. Something wasn't right. This didn't add up, and she sensed it. "We pay in cash, daily. I'm not proud of it, but like I said, I was desperate." "What?" I began. "Instructions are on the table." She turned around and walked out, the door humming as it closed, settling into place with a clank. The air compressors kicked in, sealing the door. My footsteps were muted as I went down, like something was absorbing the sound. At the bottom, a small hallway stretched out to another door, round like a hobbit door. Curious now, I walked towards it. My hands caressed it. Thick, rich wood, warm to the touch. It felt alive. To the left of the door was a small cubby with a paper. It simply read rules. Underneath it read, "These children are special children, scholarship students who board at Westlake. For their success and your safety, the following rules must be followed. Number 1. When the children start whispering, do not turn your back on them. Number 2. The nurse will take them out sometimes. When they come back, do not make eye contact for 15 minutes. Number 3. Do not try and help them after their nurse's visits. Number 4. Insubordination must be immediately punished by pressing the button. And number 5. Your payment is in the envelope. Do not take it until the day is done. Failure to adhere will absolve management of responsibility for harm." Weird, but there was an envelope under the end sheet with 7 crisp $100 bills. The lure of quick cash override any misgivings I had. Just then the bell rang. I walked to the hobbit door, which was now cracked open. Inside was a classroom. Oddly enough, the children filled in from the another entrance. 27 of them, second graders. They seemed normal, just a little quiet. A folder on the desk had my lesson plans for the day. I began teaching. At around 10 a.m. the children had recess. They exited their door. I watched through the window as they ran outside onto a lawn and began running back and forth. Suddenly it struck me. We were underground, or so I thought. How was this level with the ground outside? Maybe the rear of the school went downhill and I just didn't notice it as I came in. When they came back in, their energy was lower. I was writing on the chalkboard when it started, a faint whispering, like the rustling of fall leaves. My hand froze on the chalkboard. I tried to turn, but I was stuck. The whisperings grew, like bees, angry, humming. The lights dimmed, taking on a strange, late evening glow. Heart hammering, I summoned all my will and moved my head about a quarter of an inch. On the edge of my vision, a shadowy form loomed where the first desk was. As I looked, it coalesced into one of those students. The whispering grew angry, but I felt its grip loosen on me. I moved my head further, and more shadowy forms congealed into young children. I wrenched my neck, facing the class. The sound shattered and everything came to normal. The lights brightened. After a long moment, one of the boys raised his hand. Yes, I didn't know his name. Johnny, he said. Yes, Johnny, I replied. The answer is 7, he said. It took me a moment, then it struck me. He was solving the problems I hadn't even written on the board yet. Like nothing had even happened. That's correct, I stammered. Just then the bell rang. I looked at the clock. Somehow it was 2:45, dismissal time. 2.5 hours had just disappeared. I watched as these children, who had just moments ago been something else, as they stood up and ran out of the door. I felt lucky to be alive, grabbed the envelope and ran up the stairs. As I walked out, I saw her. She looked almost surprised. You're alive? I nodded yes. Okay, see you tomorrow? She asked. I touched the wad of cash in my pocket and thought about the party I'd be throwing tonight. Yes, I said, walking out into the afternoon. The sun was warm, but as I looked at the school, my heart skipped in my chest. Behind it, hills rose into the Blue Ridge Mountains. The wind blew, and the rustle of the leaves like a whisper. My blood ran cold. I really needed a drink. I was 11 the first time I saw him. I had just gotten out of school, and I remember being hot and tired, but still excited because I had chore money in my backpack. $8 and some change, crumpled into my bag next to a mechanical pencil I had found on the floor. That was enough for a Happy Meal, nuggets and fries, and a little toy I'd pretend I didn't care about, and a Sprite. The McDonald's was only a few blocks from the school and up the hill from my apartment. My mom wasn't crazy about me walking around alone, but she also worked 2 jobs and couldn't pick me up most days. If I got home before 5 and didn't talk to strangers, she didn't ask too many questions. And I kept my phone on 50% brightness to save battery, pretended like I was grown, and slid my earbuds in like I had somewhere important to be. That McDonald's became my little kingdom. Booth by the window, shoes kicked off under the table, watching YouTube Vine compilations on my cracked phone, while sipping a Sprite like it was champagne. I had just discovered Tumblr that year, and I was reposting Melanie Martinez fan edits and thinking I understood what the word aesthetic meant. And I was 11, going on 20, or at least I thought I was. That's probably why I didn't think it was weird when he sat near me. He didn't work there, I knew that much. He was too old to be hanging around during school hours and didn't have on a uniform. But the first time I assumed he was waiting for someone. He had on this navy hoodie, sleeves pushed up, and a raggedy backpack next to him, like he just got out of school. He looked maybe 17 or 18 at the oldest, with a face like he'd just started growing into it. Tall, white, and a very deep voice. He looked like one of those SoundCloud emo rappers. "You draw?" he asked, nodding at my sketchbook. I shrugged, trying to act unbothered. "Kinda," I said. "You got talent," he said, and I felt my chest puff up a little. Nobody ever said stuff like that to me, and especially not older boys. At school, most of the guys my age were busy with whatever the popular trends were back then. This one, he looked me in the eye when he talked, and he made me feel seen. The next time he was already there. Same booth, same backpack, and same easy smile when I walked in. "You again," he said. "You following me or something?" I laughed, a little too loud. He always knew what to say to make me feel grown. He'd ask me about school, and about my drawings, and about music. Then he started asking about other stuff, like what my background was, what kind of guys I liked. Said I didn't talk like the other black girls he knew, whatever that meant. I didn't even know how to respond to that one, but still I came back. Week after week, sometimes twice a week if I had extra change. And he was always there, like it was planned. The first few weeks, the conversations felt like a secret game. He'd show up at McDonald's like clockwork, sometimes early afternoon, sometimes after school. And we'd talk about everything, but what I was really thinking about. I liked how he made me feel special, like I was this rare thing. Not just a kid with a Happy Meal and a sketchbook, but someone worth paying attention to. When he asked for my number, I thought, this is it. I'm officially grown. I still remember the moment I handed him my phone, watching him punch digits into it. It felt thrilling, like I was stepping into a world I wasn't supposed to know about yet. My fingers brushed the screen, hesitated for a second, and then I pressed send on the first text I ever wrote to him. "Hey, it's me." His reply came almost immediately. "You're cute. You're always gonna be my favorite artist." That first text stayed with me for days. I showed it to my best friend like it was a badge of honor. "He thinks I'm cool," I told her, my voice a little higher than usual. "He really listens." She shrugged, told me to be careful, but I didn't want to hear it. Middle school kids always try to act like they're grown anyway. Everybody's pretending. I was just pretending a little bit better. The text started innocently enough. "What are you drawing now? Did you finish your homework? Are you watching that new Stranger Things?" And he even sent me links to music and playlists he said reminded him of me. But over time, things got a little different, a little heavier. He'd ask stuff that made me pause. Questions about my body, if I started changing yet, who I liked, if anyone had kissed me. I felt weird, but also proud to answer, like I was a grown woman sharing secrets with a friend. Sometimes I'd get texts when I was supposed to be asleep. "Bet you look good in your pajamas. You staying up late thinking about me." I told myself it was a joke, that he was just being funny. It was a part of the game, and I was just learning the rules. I wanted to be in on it. After all, kids at school were trading stories about boys and crushes like it was some sort of competition. I didn't want to be the only one who had never been talked to like that. But even then, there were moments when my stomach flipped. When he asked if I had started growing hair yet, or sent me a picture of his hand gripping a pillow. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. I didn't want to lose him, and besides, I thought I was grown enough to handle it. I thought I knew what I was doing. Still, I kept going to the McDonald's, even on days I didn't have any money. Sometimes I'd sit further away, pretending not to notice him watching me. And I told myself I was just being cautious. I told myself I was in control. But the truth was, it was harder to breathe when he was around. Like the air was thicker, heavier, and I didn't know how to make it stop. And it wasn't like I told my mom about any of it. I knew she wouldn't understand. She was busy with work, with bills, with trying to keep everything together. And I was supposed to be a kid, not dealing with this kind of stuff. So I kept it all inside, tucked away under layers of laughs and texts and drawings. Looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. The way his smile sometimes didn't reach his eyes. The way his questions stopped being about me and started being about control. But back then, I was 11, and I thought I was grown. And this was my first mistake. I thought blocking the number would end it. When my mom found the text, she didn't scream or curse like I thought she would. She stared at me, motionless. Then she said very quietly, "You blocked that boy. Don't answer. Don't go back there. Do you understand me?" I nodded. She didn't say anything else. She walked out of the room and left me sitting there with my heart pounding and my phone locked in her hand. And I told her I'd stopped going to McDonald's, and for a while I did. I stayed home after school, watched anime reruns on my tablet, and sketched in silence. My best friend at the time kept texting me to hang out, but I kept saying no. And I wanted to be good, I really did. But something about the quiet made me feel itchy. And I missed the days where he made me feel seen, like I wasn't just some awkward kid with Velcro sneakers. I missed the attention, and even if the words were weird sometimes, even if the questions made my stomach twist. So one Friday when my mom had a double shift, I walked back to the McDonald's. I told myself I wasn't going to talk to him. I'd just sit, eat, and then leave. That was it. And I had $10 from babysitting my cousin the weekend before. I ordered a Happy Meal, even though I told myself I wasn't a little kid anymore. It just felt safe and familiar. He was already inside. Same hoodie, same old backpack, same smile, but it didn't look soft this time. It looked sharp. He watched me sit down in the booth by the window like he'd been waiting. I thought maybe he'd give me a nod from across the room. Instead, he walked straight over and slid in next to me. Not across, directly next to me. Right there on the same side, his body pressed against mine. I stiffened, staring at the tray in front of me, and my hands were shaking a bit. "You've been avoiding me," he said, low and flat. I tried to laugh. "No, I've just been busy, homework and stuff." He didn't laugh back. Instead, his leg pressed harder against mine, and I could now feel how much taller and how much bigger he was. He was taking up all the space, and I suddenly felt how small my arms really were, and how my hoodie sleeves still bunched up at the wrist, because I hadn't hit that growth spurt yet. And I wasn't grown. I wasn't even close. He leaned in, and his hot breath hit against my face. "I thought you were different," he said, "and I thought you could handle grown-up things, but just like the rest of them little girls, you're just scared." My whole body went still. Then, without warning, he put his hand on my thigh. He gripped it tight, his fingers digging in like he was trying to leave a mark. I winced, but I didn't say anything. My whole brain just shut off. He wasn't looking at me anymore, just staring straight ahead, his fingers still pressing into the soft part above my knee. "And I thought you were actually mature," he said, almost like he was sad. "I guess I was wrong." I don't even remember standing up. I just remember the sound of the tray clattering to the floor, my fries spilling under the table, the little toy bouncing out of the box and rolling near his foot. And I didn't stop to grab it. I didn't look back. I walked out the front door, like I had somewhere to be, and then ran the second my feet hit the sidewalk. I didn't cry until I got home, my thigh throbbing where his fingers had been. After that, I didn't go anywhere but school and home. Even walking past that McDonald's made my stomach twist. That Friday was the last time I tried to act like an adult. It was the last time I let myself believe that I was really in control. Looking back now, he saw me alone. He saw how eager I was to be taken seriously, and how easy it was to plant compliments like seeds and watch them grow into something he could use. And I gave him room. I let him sit next to me. I laughed when he said creepy things. I answered texts that I didn't know how to respond to. But I was 11. I just knew I wanted to feel special, and he knew exactly how to use that. I think about that grip on my thigh more than I want to admit. Not because it hurt, but because it changed something in me. That moment snapped the fantasy clean in half. I wasn't an adult, and I was a little girl in a hoodie too big and a heart too soft to carry the weight he put in it. And I remember how fast the fear came rushing in, how fake all the flirting felt after. I remember the silence afterward, the kind that sticks to you. Now that I'm 21, I catch myself watching girls like I used to be, sitting at McDonald's, earbuds in, and doodling on napkins, thinking they've got it all figured out. And I want to tell them, you don't. That's not your fault, it's his. The older boy who keeps showing up where you feel safe. The one who talks to you like you're different, like you're smarter than everyone else, like he's doing you a favor just by paying attention. And that boy doesn't think you're special. He thinks you're easy to fool. And I'm not ashamed of being that little girl anymore. I was soft and bright and curious, and he mistook that all for permission. But I'm angry for her. I wish somebody had caught me walking into that McDonald's and told me to go home. And I wish I had believed my mom the first time. And I wish I had known that no grown man should ever have been paying that much attention to a kid. I don't remember when it started. I was too young. Johnny, one of my neighbors, used to sneak in through the crawl space at the back of my closet to play. Even now, I can still picture him so clearly in my head. His sharp blue eyes, embedded in sunken sockets, his filthy, unwashed hands, fingernails overgrown and caked in dirt, his crooked smile with 3 front teeth missing. I can still smell him too, the musk of sweat and grime, the sickly sweet stench of someone who's been rolling in grass and dead leaves. He seems like such a recent memory, even now, 19 years later. As much as I want to, I can't forget him. Not after what happened in the summer of 2006. 3 knocks from inside my closet. That was a sign that Johnny was there. I opened the door, greeted by my friend, his toothy smile on full display. I returned the gesture, inviting him into my room. "Hurry up, I want to show you the new game I got." Pokemon Emerald had come out a year prior, and I had just managed to scrounge up enough money to buy it. I took Johnny by the wrist, his lanky frame bending awkwardly to accommodate. He didn't protest. He listened intently as I explained the game mechanics, his eyes glued to the screen. That's one of the things I liked about Johnny. He was an adult, but he didn't treat me like all the other grown-ups did. He listened to what I had to say, and he made me feel seen. Maybe that's why I didn't tell anyone sooner. After around 30 minutes, Johnny told me he had something of his own that he wanted me to see. I perked up, temporarily distracted from my game. "I found it at the park today," he said, extending a cheap camera for me to hold. I didn't want to put him down. I had a way nicer one than that, but he was obviously proud of it. "Neat," I said, turning it over in my hands. "Do you want to take a picture?" Johnny nodded, a grin inching across his lips. I leaned in and he took a snapshot of us. We couldn't see what it looked like yet. He'd need to get the film developed for that. "Cool, I'll give you one when I get them back." We suddenly heard footsteps creaking down the hall, and Johnny's eyes grew wide. We knew what that meant. He scrambled to my closet, shutting himself inside before my mother reached my room to tell me that dinner was ready. I didn't see Johnny very much after that. That wasn't too unusual, though. Sometimes he would go a week or so without coming to see me. I think about 10 days had passed before I heard the signal from my closet again. I eagerly leapt up and threw open the door. Johnny's familiar grin was there to greet me. He accompanied me to the rug where we usually sat, stationed in front of the TV. "Come on, Johnny. You said you'd play Jenga with me last time. I got the blocks set up already," I said, tugging him to where the tower sat, undisturbed, from where I had built it days prior. "Ah, yeah, I remember, but first I got something for you," he said, pulling a photograph from his pocket. I'd forgotten all about it. "Here, this is for you." He handed it to me and I glanced down at our smiling faces. My eyes traveled from the photo to the corkboard on my wall. Johnny understood the implication. "Joey, you gotta keep this picture somewhere safe, okay? Somewhere your mom can't find it. We'll both get in big trouble if she sees." And I nodded. We'd been over this plenty of times before. Mom couldn't know about Johnny. Not ever. If she found out, he wouldn't be able to come over anymore. Johnny started coming by more frequently after that. He began showing up almost nightly, to the point where it was becoming a routine. He would knock and I'd let him in, and we'd play with action figures or board games, or draw pictures until Mom would come down the hall and scare him off. I didn't have many friends in school, so I really enjoyed our arrangement. That is, until one night when Johnny came back a little different. A day went by without him popping in, then 2, and then 3. After I hadn't heard from him in 2 weeks, I was starting to worry. What if something bad happened? As much as his absence shook me, I knew there wasn't a thing I could do about it. I was just a kid. But to my relief, eventually he did come back. But now I wish he never did. I was sitting on my bed reading a comic book when I heard it. 3 knocks from inside my closet. These didn't sound like Johnny's regular knocks, though. They were quicker, more frantic. I didn't register the difference at first. I was just happy that Johnny had finally returned. I left off my bed and raced over to the door, throwing it open. With a huge grin on my face, I expected to find Johnny standing there, bearing that same toothy smile that he always did. But when I opened the door, I was met with a different sight. Johnny stood before me, but he wasn't smiling. He looked even dirtier than he normally did. The coat he wore pockmarked with holes and his hands caked in a layer of grime. He had scabs all over his face, as if he'd been relentlessly picking at the flesh. His eyes darted around the room, shifting from one object to another. My heart dropped, and I could tell that something was very wrong. "Johnny, are you okay?" I asked, a sudden feeling of unease coursing through me. Johnny's eyes snapped to me. His sclera marred with spiderwebbing red veins. He grabbed my wrist and tried ushering me toward the closet. "Joey, there's something I have to show you. Come with me." He pulled me hard, his dirty fingernails digging into my flesh. Little red droplets appeared, tumbling onto the floor. By that point I was scared. This man was not the gentle, caring friend I knew. I screamed, both out of fear and pain. I could hear Mom's footsteps crashing down the hall in response. Normally Johnny would have hidden at the sound, but not this time. He was determined to take me with him. "Joey, you have to see this. I need you to see this. They're going to get me soon." Tears involuntarily welled in my eyes. I didn't know what Johnny had to show me, and I didn't want to. Fortunately, I would never have to see what it was. My mom bursted into the room. It took her a moment to register what was happening, but the second she did, she rushed over to us and began hitting Johnny as hard as she could. He eventually let me go and fell to the floor. Then Mom scooped me up and bolted down the hall and into her room, where she locked the door and phoned the police. I didn't see Johnny being led out of the house in handcuffs. I'm glad I didn't. I think that image would have stuck with me for a very long time. Mom had long since forgotten about the panel at the back of the closet, buried by old clothes and shoes. Inside was a small storage room. It turns out there was never a crawl space that led outside. I'd been lied to, but even more disturbing was what the police found in their search. Among a slew of wrappers and empty food containers, they discovered a sleeping bag, dozens of dirty needles, and photographs. Hundreds of them. I was in every single one of them. Walking home from school, eating breakfast, playing with the neighborhood kids. I didn't know how he got some of them. That still terrifies me. How many times had Johnny been lurking just out of sight? Additionally, they had found a notebook. It had only one entry. The photograph I had taken with Johnny was taped inside with the words, "Johnny and Joey, best friends forever," written underneath. I don't know how many years he received. We moved shortly after he was apprehended, and Mom didn't ever bring it up again. I don't blame her. I also tried my best to forget. But even after all this time, I can't get it out of my head. Sometimes I glance down at the tiny scar on my wrist and wonder what would have happened had I followed Johnny into that room. The worst deaths, in my opinion, are always accidental. I read last week about a mother who rolled onto her newborn and suffocated it. Every year, toddlers die from being left in hot cars. And then you hear stories of kids playing games, like one boy who hid in an unplugged freezer and suffocated to death during hide and seek. Can you imagine? Imagine being the person responsible in any of these situations. To me, this is so much more terrifying than the prospect of the paranormal. I'd much rather be haunted by a ghost than by guilt over unintentionally hurting someone. My husband, Wade, is the opposite. He's unbothered by accidents, but petrified of horror movies about demons or vengeful ghosts. But as I told him, none of those things are real, so why be scared? He counters that accidents are without malice, therefore not as scary as murderous ghosts that might be real. I mean, I guess he has a point about the lack of malice, not about ghosts that might be real. I know they're not, because if they were, my best friend would definitely be haunting me. And I guess in some ways she is. You see, whenever I read about a prank gone wrong, I stop breathing for a moment. I'm choked by guilt. After all these years, I still don't know if it was my own fault or not. I was never charged, and my friends insist I need to stop blaming myself. But how can I? How can I move on, not knowing if it's because of me? Rosa got into the suitcase on her own. Lakeisha and I helped her, and we were all drunk and giggling. She was supposed to surprise Bolin. She had a huge crush on him at the time. Let me back up and let me try to explain the situation in full. We were at a party. Our friend group had been together for years, and we rented out this lodge. Me and my husband Wade, who back then was just my crush, his buddies Bolin and Tucker and JB, and the girls who were my besties, Lakeisha and Rosa and Kay. There were also some other friends who stopped by who we met earlier in the day while hiking. I can't remember their names anymore. What I do remember though is that we all had a lot to drink. Rosa was my best friend, but she wasn't exactly perfect. She was like a butterfly who sips from every flower, a real heartbreaker, beautiful and passionate. I was a little bit jealous of the attention she had, and also kind of in awe of her. Whoever she was with fell hard, like she was the love of their life, but she never committed. She'd be on again off again with JB, then seduced Wade, which was kind of a bitchy thing because she knew I had a crush on him at the time. Now her eyes were on Bolin. I forgot whose idea it was for her to hide in the suitcase, mine or hers. All the luggage was in the basement because that's where the boys had put it when we had arrived at the lodge. Lakeisha said something like, Bolin's suitcase is big enough to hide a body, and that's when Rosa, or me, had the idea she'd hide in it. And Rosa decided to spice up the prank by wearing lingerie. When Bolin took the suitcase up to his room and opened it, he'd find a sexy surprise. We were stupid, very, very stupid, and none of us had good judgment, especially since we were very drunk. Once Rosa squeezed inside, whining about her hair getting caught in the zipper, Lakeisha and I went to go badger the boys to bring everyone's bags to their rooms. I remember Bolin delivered mine, and I was staying outside in a tent with Kay. The lodge didn't have enough bedrooms for everybody, and we wanted to sleep under the stars anyway. Kay had no idea about the prank, and was confused when I kept urging Bolin to go inside and check his bag. After he left, I told her about Rosa, and because Kay was actually sober, she told me to go make sure Rosa wasn't stuck in there. So I checked to make sure the suitcase wasn't still at the bottom of the stairs. At least, I think I did. But I was drunk. While all of us were sitting outside watching fireworks later, I noticed Bolin missing and asked Wade where he went. He told me Bolin had gone up to his room early. Since he hadn't come back, Lakeisha and I assumed Rosa was in there with him, and that her lingerie stunt had worked. In fact, Lakeisha and I were whispering about it all evening. In the morning when Bolin came down, Lakeisha and I asked him about last night, all smirks. He looked completely clueless. Then Lakeisha asked where Rosa was, and he was still clueless. But what about his suitcase? Hadn't he opened it? He said someone had shoved all his clothes into the closet in a pile, and he wasn't sure why. He assumed he was being pranked or something, and he hadn't seen his suitcase. So you never opened it? Asked Lakeisha. Dread bloomed in my belly. Oh God, I thought. Lakeisha was telling him how he'd be taking his clothes out and Rosa had hidden inside, hoping to surprise him in her lingerie, and Bolin blushed and said that he was gay. Gay? But his coming out had hardly even registered because where was Rosa? None of us knew. We quickly went to wake everyone else up, hoping someone had seen her last night. Oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God. I checked. Didn't I check? I swear I checked. Prayers ran through my head, but I was drunk. I wasn't sure if I really had. I went downstairs to the basement. There was the suitcase, still tucked away at the bottom of the stairs. It was exactly where we left it when we zipped Rosa inside the night before. Nobody wanted to open the suitcase. The boys argued about who had left it there. JB said he lifted it but noticed how heavy it was and asked someone else to take it. Each of them had thought another guy was going to grab it. Bolin didn't think to check because he found his clothes piled in the closet. I'm ashamed to say I went outside when Lakeisha reached for the zipper. Wade came out and joined me. While the others checked the contents of the suitcase, Wade and I just sat outside. As we heard the gasp and whispers, his fingers gripped mine tightly, and I put my head into my hands and sobbed. She'd suffocated, of course, but it had taken a long time. The police wondered why none of us had heard her gasping for help, but Kay sheepishly told them about the fireworks. A prank gone wrong, authorities ruled. My friends said then, and still say now, that ultimately Rosa was the one most responsible for her own misfortune, that she'd made her own decisions, that all of us were a little guilty, but none of us was wholly responsible for a tragic accident. But it was my hand that closed the zipper. I've lain in bed, thinking about her gasping for air. Why didn't she scream? Why didn't we hear any muffled shouts? I imagined her, squeezed into the darkness, while her pleas for help go unanswered. But the real reason I'm writing this is because this morning I saw a story in the news about a woman in her underwear, found strangled on the beach. My husband switched away from the reporting, and when I asked why, he looked surprised and said he thought it might trigger me. Why? I asked. It wasn't a prank. I thought it might remind you of Rosa, you know, the lingerie. I suppose that aspect was similar. To be honest, the part of the tragedy had never really stuck with me as much. But now I think about how we all stopped talking about her afterwards. How her death was only a blip in the news. No details were released. In our friend group, Rosa's death became a taboo subject. Almost like she had never been with us at all. We all silently agreed to forget her, but the more I think of that report on the news, the more I'm getting the feeling from that day. That top of the stairs feeling. Like I'm looking down and seeing something I don't want to see. That, oh God, sense of dread. And I'm about to be sick. Because Wade dated her too, and he loved her as well. And I'm more and more certain I looked down the stairs before the fireworks and there was no suitcase there. And now, I'm wondering, if Wade never saw what was in that suitcase, never picked it up or opened it or moved it, how did he know she was wearing lingerie when she died? I drive a truck for a living. I'm not one of those guys with a tricked out rig and a proud handle. I'm just a guy with a CDL and a mountain of debt, hauling cheap furniture from one soulless warehouse to another. My life is a series of lonely highways, greasy diner coffee, and the constant, hypnotic drone of a diesel engine. I've seen every corner of this country through the bug-spattered glass of my windshield. At least I thought I had seen it all. I was wrong. This happened last night, on that notoriously desolate stretch of I-80 that cuts through the salt flats of the state. It's a place that feels like the surface of the moon. Flat, white, and empty for hundreds of miles in every direction. It was 3 a.m. The road is a straight, black ribbon unwinding into a void. The only light coming from my own high beams and a brilliant, star-dusted sky. I'd been driving for about 10 hours straight, pushing to make a deadline in Salt Lake City. My eyes were burning. My brain was a fuzzy, caffeine-addled mess. That's when I saw the flicker of movement. It was in the scrub desert to my right, at the very edge of my headlight's reach. My first thought was a coyote or maybe a deer that had wandered too far from anything green. I kept my eyes on the road, but I was aware of it now. Then I saw it again. It was a tall, loping shape, moving with a terrifying, unnatural grace. It was keeping pace with my rig. I was doing a steady 65 miles per hour. My blood ran cold. I took my foot off the accelerator, the truck slowing to 60. The shape in the darkness slowed with me, its long, spindly legs pumping with an effortless fluid motion. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. I pushed the accelerator down, the engine groaning as the truck climbed back to 70. It sped up too, staying perfectly parallel to my cab, a silent, dark greyhound in the night. I couldn't make out any details, just its silhouette. It was vaguely humanoid, but too tall, too thin. Its arms were too long, and its stride was so impossibly wide. It ran with a smooth, gliding motion, its feet seeming to barely touch the ground. This went on for 5 miles, an eternity, Just the roar of my engine and the silent, impossible runner in the dark. My logical mind was scrambling for an explanation. An optical illusion. A strange reflection in my side window. But it was too consistent. Too real. My hands slick with a cold sweat reached for the CB radio. It was an old habit. A holdover from a time before cell phones. Most of the time the channels were just a hissing, static-filled void. But out here in the dead of night, sometimes you could find another lonely soul to talk to. I keyed the mic, my voice a shaky, hoarse whisper. Breaker 19, anyone got a copy out here on I-80? Eastbound about 100 miles west of the lake. The static hissed back at me. I was about to give up when a voice crackled through the speaker. It was an old, weary voice, gravelly from a lifetime of cigarettes and truck stop coffee. You got a copy, driver. What's your 20? I don't know, I stammered. I think I'm seeing something out here. Something running alongside me. There was a long, heavy pause on the other end of the line. The static hissed and popped. When the old-timer's voice came back, all the weariness was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp urgency. Son, you listen to me, he said, his voice low and serious. You listen to me and you do exactly what I say. You see a tall, fast runner out there in the dark. Yeah, I whispered. Okay, you've got a pacer. We call them pacers. Now you're gonna follow a few simple rules, you got that? Simple, but you don't break them. Not for anything. What are the rules? Rule number 1, the voice crackled. You do not take your eyes off the road to stare at it. You see it in your peripheral vision. You keep it there. You do not give it your full attention, do you understand? Oh, okay, I said, my eyes glued to the white lines on the asphalt in front of me, even as my brain was screaming at me to look to my right. Rule number 2, you don't acknowledge it in any way. You don't flash your lights. You don't honk your horn. You don't talk to it. As far as you're concerned, it's not there. It's just a shadow, a trick of the light. You give it nothing. Got it, I breathed. And rule number 3, the old-timer said, his voice dropping even lower. And this is the most important one. Whatever you do, son, you do not stop your vehicle. Not for anything. Not for a flat tire. Not for a flashing light. Not if the damn engine catches on fire. You keep that truck rolling until the sun comes up. You hear me? But what is it? I pleaded. What does it want? There was another long, heavy sigh from the other side of the radio. Kid, it's an escort. The problem is you don't want to go where it's taking you. You keep driving. You keep your eyes on the road and you drive east. Pray you got enough fuel to make it to dawn. The radio went silent. He was gone. And I was alone again, with the silent runner and his 3 terrible rules. I tried to focus. Eyes on the road. Don't acknowledge it. Don't stop. It sounded simple enough, but the presence of it, a constant, loping shadow in the corner of my vision, was a screaming distraction. I glanced down at my GPS, hoping the familiar, comforting sight of the digital map would ground me. But the screen was wrong. The little icon that represented my truck was no longer on the clean, straight line of I-80. It was on a thin, gray road that wasn't on the map. A road that was veering off into the vast, blank, unlabeled spot on the screen. The GPS was still tracking my speed, my heading, but it was showing me on a road that simply didn't exist. My heart seized. I looked up, and up ahead in the distance I saw them. Faint flickering lights. The lights of a town. It was impossible. I knew this stretch of road like the back of my hand. There was nothing out here. No towns. No truck stops. no civilization for at least another 50 miles. But the lights were there, a warm, inviting glow in the oppressive darkness. And the pacer, still running alongside my truck, subtly, gracefully, lifted one of its long, thin arms and then just gestured. A slow, deliberate point towards an off-ramp that was now materializing out of the darkness ahead. An off-ramp that I knew, with almost absolute certainty, was not supposed to be there. The off-ramp led directly towards the ghost town. It was a silent, undeniable command. A polite but firm invitation to a place I did not want to go. Rule number 3, do not stop. But what about turning? The old-timer hadn't said anything about turning. My hands were slick on the steering wheel. The pull to turn, to follow the lights, to follow the pacer's silent instruction was a physical thing. A magnetic urge, but the old man's terrified voice was a louder sound in my head. You don't want to go where it's taking you. I kept the wheel straight. I kept my eyes on the road ahead, on the true, real, lonely ribbon of I-80. I ignored the phantom off-ramp. I ignored the silent, pointing arm in my periphery. The moment I passed the off-ramp, the atmosphere in the cab changed. The air grew cold and heavy, and the pacer, it was no longer eloping gracefully. The smooth, fluid motion was gone, replaced by a jerky, angry, frantic pumping of its limbs. It was still keeping pace, but it was a movement of rage, of frustrated energy. I had disobeyed. Up ahead I saw flashing lights. My first thought was a police car, a state trooper. A wave of relief rushed over me. But as I got closer, I saw it was just a car, pulled over on the shoulder, its hazard lights blinking in a steady, lonely rhythm. The driver's side door was wide open, and standing perfectly still beside the car, silhouetted in the flashing orange light, was another pacer. It wasn't moving. It was just standing there, as still as a statue. Its head turned towards my approaching truck. It was waiting. Its partner had failed to guide me off the road, so now it had a roadblock. Rule number 1, don't stare at it. And rule number 3, don't stop. My foot trembled on the accelerator. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to slow down, to swerve. But I could hear the old man's voice. I kept the wheel straight. I focused on the space between the stopped car and the white line. A gap that was barely wide enough for my rig to fit through. As I drew level with the car, I couldn't help but glance. For a split second, my eyes met with the pacer's. It had no face, just a smooth, gray, featureless expanse of skin where its eyes and mouth should have been. And as my high beams washed over it, that blank face turned, its head tracking my cab as I passed. A silent, damning accusation. I shot past the stopped car, my truck's side mirror missing its open door by inches. In my rearview mirror, I saw the pacer still standing there, a silent, faceless sentinel in the flashing lights. And then it started to move, loping after me, joining its partner in the angry, frantic chase. There were 2 of them now. The next few hours were the purest, most distilled form of terror I have ever known. 2 loping, silent shapes in the darkness, one on either side of my truck. The road in front of me seemed to warp and twist, the white lines writhing like snakes. The ghost town lights appeared and disappeared on the horizon, a siren's call I had to constantly, actively resist. My GPS was useless, the screen a chaotic mess of non-existent roads and impossible topography. I was alone in the dark, in a place that was no longer following the rules of the world I know. My only compass was the memory of the old trucker's voice. My only hope was the faint, gray promise of dawn on the eastern horizon. I drove. I kept my eyes on the road. I didn't acknowledge them. I didn't stop. And as the first tentative rays of sunlight finally, blessedly began to pierce the darkness, they were gone. They didn't run off. They didn't fade away. They were just not there anymore. The world outside my windshield was once again the familiar, empty, beautiful Utah desert. My GPS chimed and the screen returned to normal, showing my little truck icon sitting perfectly on the solid, reassuring line of I-80. I drove until I reached town, the real one. I delivered my load. I quit my job, and I'm now in a cheap motel room, 1,000 miles from that stretch of road. But I know I'm not safe, because last night I broke rule number 1. I stared. I let it see me see it. And I had the terrible, unshakable feeling that the next time I'm on a lonely road late at night, the pacer will be there again, until it makes me follow it. Early Sunday morning at around 5 a.m., I woke up to this violent banging and shaking on my door. I live alone on the second floor of an old apartment building downtown. I've been taking Benadryl to sleep for a few months, and sometimes I sleep weird, so for a moment I thought, did that really just happen? And then I heard whoever it was start doing it again. This time these super loud bangs like they're charging the door. That's when I realized both my fan and AC units were off. The power was off. It stopped after the second time and I heard something stomp down the stairs. And I laid here processing what had just happened. It's dead quiet without the fan, and I heard a guy's voice outside saying, "No, we were just walking." I'm still lying here motionless in fear, and I try to think of someone to call. And a few months ago, my downstairs neighbors got my package by mistake and messaged me on Facebook about it after seeing my name. I'd seen her a few times and I know she had these 2 absolutely ripped pit bulls. So I messaged her thinking she won't even see it till she wakes up. Nope, she immediately starts calling me. She says she saw 2 guys coming out of the building after trying her door, mine and the other person across the hall from me, and then tried to lie and say it wasn't them. She had already called the police, and at this point the intruders are gone, so I go downstairs to meet her and we find the breaker box door ripped off and all the switches off. Which sucks because there's a camera outside, but our landlord said he's trying to back up the footage to see if it caught them. Our other neighbor wakes up. She had no idea what was happening. Finally, the downstairs neighbor got the power turned back on, and the cops showed up like 20 minutes later to get statements. Apparently, the downstairs girl was awake the whole time and heard them trying her door, and her dogs were doing a low growl thing instead of barking. She gave them their descriptions. Cops haven't updated any of us yet. Some of my coworkers said maybe it was the TikTok trend, where they kick the door in. Thankfully, my door opens outward, not inward, if that's the case. But I feel like cutting the power and trying to open all 3 units seems more like an actual break-in. I've barely slept since it happened, and I'm about to try to, right now. I don't usually work on Sundays, but I needed some extra cash, so I took an early shift. I came home around 2 p.m. I live in this apartment building. My apartment is on the first floor, along with another one that belongs to this dude who's rarely ever home. Then there's Mrs. Rogue's place on the ground floor, and then the second floor has another 2 flats, one owned by an elderly couple and the other by this family. that I don't see very often that live directly above me. Sometimes I hear the kids in the morning moaning about having to get ready for school and then stomping down the stairs. Sometimes I hear hushed voices and dishes clattering. After 10 p.m. though, everything usually goes quiet. I got to my door, and as I was searching for my keys in my bag, I could hear voices upstairs. They were hushed and a little tense, stressing the words and mixing them together. I couldn't really make out what they were saying, but they seemed to be talking about something really important. I assumed they were a family because I kept hearing the kids, and sounds that I generally attribute to a family home. Anyway, as I said, I finally got a hold of my keys and unlocked the door. Yet, I didn't immediately step inside after I opened it. I don't know why I let it swing open and remained there listening for 2 or more seconds, but I'm somewhat glad I did. The moment the door was heard, the voices upstairs stopped, completely, as if they were listening to me now. I remained still. We all studied the silence for a while. I heard a singular step on the stairs above. That's when my back went cold and my muscles tensed up for whatever reason. I got the sudden urge to just go inside and shut the door behind me, which I did. Afterwards, I started putting some groceries in the fridge and doing some errands around the house. Faintly at first, and then stronger, I started hearing this birthday song upstairs. I smiled and sighed. They were planning the birthday. That's why they were so precautious and so nervous. It sounded like there were around 5 to 6 people singing, maybe. Happy birthday, dear Jonah. That was cute. When they finished, they started again. I did find it weird, but I assumed that the kid had asked for it again. Kids love blowing out candles and whatever. It was an awfully long song, and it kept looping until reaching its conclusion. Just like the first time, it had a lot of unnecessary runs and fillers, and extra lyrics. When they finished, a little pause followed, and then they started again in the exact same way. Fucking weird family, I thought, and by that time I had gotten annoyed, so I just put on my headphones and laid down on the couch. I fell asleep around 4 or 5 p.m. I woke up from the nap disorientated. Man, after work naps hit the hardest. I'd slept until around 8 p.m. and the sun was peeking at me from behind some buildings. A sunset that was more blue than red. A melancholy and confusion that reminded me of how liminal your house felt when you would go to sleep after school and wake up with a sore throat and a huge pillow mark on your face. With your mood ruined, your mother suddenly calling you to go out to dinner. I swallowed, staring blankly at the window, highlighted in gold and rum. I rubbed my eyes, then massaged my face. I stood up to get a glass of water, walked barefoot to the kitchen, which was now sunken in that specific 8 p.m. darkness, and stood there still and silent, not knowing what I wanted from my life. Then I finally registered one important detail. The folks upstairs were still singing Happy Birthday. I listened for a while, unsure of what my reaction should be. I wondered if they had some recording playing on a loop, but that really wasn't the case, as each version sounded different from the previous. They really were weird. Or maybe their kid was just eccentric. Maybe they were practicing for some performance. I started thinking, as I said, I hadn't personally met these people before, so I had no idea what they did. Maybe they really were practicing. I put my headphones on and went on trying to make some sort of dinner, even though I wasn't really hungry and my throat still hurt. I ate, watched my show, then took a shower. Their singing at this point had really started to piss me off. It was now approaching 10 p.m. and I felt the need to go upstairs and tell them to quit it. I'm not confrontational. I really don't like telling people they upset me, and most don't have an appropriate reaction at all. I didn't want to talk to them, so I called my mom. I started telling her about my day, but she interrupted me, asking me about the people upstairs. Yeah, they've been doing it for hours. I don't know, it's really starting to get on my nerves. Well, go up to them and knock. Aren't the other residents annoyed? The old people upstairs? I'm sure they wanted to sleep by now. Maybe I could just put on some music that would cover them up. But do you want to listen to music? No, not really. Then why do it to please them? Go upstairs, Michaela. I sighed and reluctantly agreed. After hanging up, I put on a sweater and unlocked my front door. The moment I opened it, the air felt a little colder. I stared at the dark hallway, illuminated by the ray of light from my door, and another faint light coming from upstairs. I walked up the stairs. The second floor was more animated than the first. The door to the family's apartment was slightly open, and I could see light and movement behind. I slowly approached it, then peeked inside. I could see a hallway with balloons and confetti peacefully floating around. A faint smell of candles and sweetness lingered out. I didn't want to disturb too much, so I tried to be discreet, while I quietly and almost imperceptibly pushed the door slightly more. The small hallway made way to a dining room. The shadows were dancing on the walls as people clapped around the table and sang. On the table was a cake with pink and purple frosting, sprinkles and some writing I couldn't really decipher. The song carried on but was hoarser than I remembered it. People were smiling, swaying from side to side at the person sitting in front of the cake. The lighting was dim and pleasant, its only source being the candles. The people around were a little tense, but overall it reminded me of my own birthdays as a kid. Some boxes lay scattered on the floor. I tried to take a better look at them, or the kid. The child looked like a young boy, with a big birthday hat on. He, I think, could have been 10 or 12, and his face was round and stretched into a big smile. I stared for a while at the teeth. I didn't know what prompted me to make that observation, but he had adult teeth, which were rotten and yellow, sticking out of his mouth in abnormal directions. His eyes were wide and red, like he'd been crying for a while. I don't remember seeing him blink at all. In the minutes that I had watched, it felt like hours had passed. He looked really shaken and tense. I had never seen a child like that before in my life. All the courage I had before peeking through the door had evaporated. I must have zoned out watching the scene. When I was pulled away from my trance, the kid shifted his eyes from the candles, which had now almost completely melted, and looked straight at me. I felt seen like I had never been seen before. My heart completely collapsed, leaving a painful knot in my chest as I made eye contact with the child. His smile slowly faded, turning into a grimace. I wanted to run, but somehow I was frozen in place. Suddenly, he blew out the candles, and the room was engulfed in utter darkness. I heard something shuffle in the dark towards me, gasped and shut the door behind me as I practically jumped down the stairs. The shuffling and scratching followed. I gripped the door and slammed it behind me. Eyes wide and unfocused, I barely managed to lock it as the banging started. The song upstairs had stopped. I looked through the peephole. The hallway was completely dark now, but I could make out the details of the face I looked at before in the dimly lit dining room. Only now we were at eye level, which was impossible, since that had been a kid that I saw before. The more I thought, the more I realized I had no idea what prompted me to assume it had been a kid. The round face, the childish clothing, trying to decipher the memory meant analyzing every detail of that horrible face, a thing I really didn't want to do. The banging turned to scratching. I yelled I was going to call the police. My voice died in my throat. The banging was so strong that it was undoubtedly going to break down my door. Suddenly, I heard a distinct sound upstairs. The banging and scratching instantly stopped. It was a door opening. The elderly couple's door. "Hey, what on earth are you doing? It's the middle of the night." I watched through the people as the kid, well, not a kid, walked away from my door upstairs. "Quit it before I call the police. It's enough that I have to hear your kids' tantrums every day, lady, but..." The voice abruptly stopped. I listened, barely breathing. No scream. No sound. Nothing. Faint scratching, then shuffling, then a faint cry that sounded more like forced sobs. I silently dialed up the police and barely managed to whisper what was going on, afraid that I might be heard. As I was detailing the problem, I looked through the peephole once again to be greeted by that face. Grimaced eyes, bloodshot and sunken into the head. "You're welcome to join next year. That's why we left the door open," came the voice of an adult, out of the face of a 12-year-old boy. I gasped and ducked, as if that would save me. The police came in around half an hour, which was an insanely long amount of time. They went upstairs and sealed off the entirety of the second floor. They refused to give me details. I had to wait for the headlines and accept some vague answers from the numerous phone calls I'd given since. "Miss, there were never kids living upstairs. 2 of them were grown-ups, but 2 of them were pretending to be kids." They refused to tell me what had happened to the elderly couple. They barely mumbled something that included kidnapping, massacre, disembowelment. Some of the victims, which had been many, were hostages, made to play along. Their presents were just pieces of flesh, toys made of bones with bows on them. One of them was a teeth necklace. I'm going through a really hard time now, trying to move all my stuff without having to go to that place too often. I can't sell it or rent it out, maybe to some true crime fanatic. I moved in with my parents, but I asked them to add extra locks to their doors, and windows and security cameras everywhere. They assumed I was paranoid and suffering from some sort of PTSD. I let them believe that. However, I had watched the security footage of that night, showing the outside of my door. The birthday boy I'd spoken to hadn't gone back upstairs. He just crawled to the window and jumped out. I don't know where he is now, and I really hope that goes both ways. I'm a wildlife photographer. It's a career built on patience, stillness, and the ability to become just another silent, uninteresting part of the landscape. I've spent weeks at a time utterly alone in the vast remote corners of national forests. My only companions were the whispers of the wind and the patient clicking of my camera's shutter. And I've waited 14 hours in a cramped blind, motionless, just for a 3-second glimpse of a reclusive pine marten. That's how I thrive on that solitude and how I love the deep, profound quiet of the wild. I always thought it's where I feel most myself. At least it used to be. Now the silence is the most terrifying thing I know, because it's never truly silent. And the solitude is a lie, because I am never, ever truly alone. This all started about 3 months ago. I was on a long-term project in a massive, sparsely populated national forest. It's a primeval sort of place, full of ancient Douglas firs that tower like cathedral spires, their tops lost in perpetual mist. My goal was to capture a portfolio of the elusive Cascade Red Fox, a beautiful but notoriously shy creature. For the first few weeks it was business as usual. I'd rise before dawn, hike miles into the back country and set up, waiting for the forest to offer up its secrets. One evening I got the shot I'd been dreaming of, a magnificent male fox. The color of its coat was of a dying fire, paused in a sun-dappled clearing, its head cocked, listening. The light was perfect, the composition was something else. I rattled off a dozen frames, my heart soaring with that pure electric thrill that only photographers know. Back at my base camp that night, I eagerly loaded the photos onto my laptop. I scrolled through, and there it was, the money shot. The fox was perfectly in focus, its eyes were sharp and intelligent, the background was a beautiful, soft green and gold, and it was perfect. Except for the smudge. In the upper right-hand corner of the frame there was a strange vertical blur of white light. It was out of focus, just an artifact, but it was annoying. It looked like a lens flare, but the sun was behind me. It made no sense. I checked the other frames and it was there, in the exact same spot, in every single one of them. A persistent ghostly slash against the otherwise perfect image. I sighed, chalking it up to some weird internal reflection in my lens, and made a mental note to clean all my gear thoroughly. A week later, I was photographing a herd of elk by a river at dawn. Again, a perfect morning. The mist was rising off the water. The great animals were silhouetted against the nascent light. It was a primordial, beautiful scene, and I took hundreds of photos. And when I reviewed them later, the smudge was there again. But this time it was in a different location, a different time of day, and a completely different lens. But the same vertical, out-of-focus slash of white light was in the upper periphery of the frame. Now I was more than annoyed. I was obsessed. I thought to myself that it was a consistent technical problem, something I needed to solve. Was it a scratch on my camera's sensor, a flaw in the shutter mechanism? I spent 2 full days troubleshooting, running diagnostics, taking shots of blank surfaces. I found nothing. My gear was, by all accounts, in perfect working order. The only way to solve it was to recreate the conditions. I went back to the clearing where I photographed the fox. I set up my camera on a tripod in the exact same spot, at the exact same time of day. I framed the shot identically, and then I waited. My goal was to see the flare appear through the viewfinder before I took the picture. I sat there for hours, still as a stone, my eyes pressed to the camera. The sun dappled the clearing. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves. The forest was quiet, but as the afternoon wore on, a new feeling began to creep in. A low-grade primal hum of anxiety. It was the feeling of being watched. It's a sensation every creature in the wild knows. A prickling at the back of your neck. A sudden, cold awareness that you are no longer just an observer, but you are also the observed. I slowly, carefully scanned the tree line, my eyes searching for the glint of an eye, the twitch of an ear. But I saw nothing. But the feeling grew stronger. It was coming from my side, from the very edge of my vision. I kept my head perfectly still, my breathing slow and even, but my eyes darted to the right. And I saw it, for a fraction of a second. It was a tall, wavering shape, like a column of heat haze. It was the shape of a man, long and thin, and it was hanging upside down from a thick, high branch of a fir tree, its form indistinct and shimmering. The moment my brain registered the impossible image, I snapped my head to look directly at it. And there was nothing there. Just the tree branch against empty sky. The forest was still. The feeling of being watched was gone. I sat there, my heart hammering against my ribs, my mouth dry. I told myself I was just tired and that the solitude was getting to me. I was just seeing things. It was a trick of the light, a figment of a sleep-deprived imagination. I packed up my gear, unnerved, and hiked back to my truck. I needed a break. I needed to see other people. I drove to the nearest ranger station, a rustic little cabin that served as the park's administrative hub. There were 2 rangers on duty, an older grizzled man with a kind, weary face and a younger woman. I made some small talk and bought a new map I didn't need, and then, trying to sound casual, I asked my question. "Hey, this is going to sound weird," I started, "but have you guys ever seen strange things out deep in the woods, like tricks of the light?" The older ranger looked up from his paperwork. He and the younger ranger exchanged a look. It was a brief, knowing glance, but it was enough. "What kind of tricks of the light are we talking about?" he asked, his voice a low, calm rumble. I felt like an idiot, but I pressed on. Like a shape, a tail-shimmering shape, of a man hanging upside down from a tree. You only see it out of the corner of your eye. The younger ranger's friendly expression tightened. The older just sighed a long, tired sound and leaned back into his chair. "The Upside Down Man," he said, and it wasn't a question. "Yeah, we've all seen him. Most of the folks who spend enough time out here have." A wave of cold relief immediately followed by a wave of colder dread. I wasn't crazy, but that meant that thing was real. What is it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Don't know," he said, shaking his head. "Don't want to know. It's just a feature of the landscape, I guess. And a weird local phenomenon, like a magnetic anomaly or a patch of strange fog." "But what does it do?" "Nothing," he said, leaning forward and fixing me with a serious paternal gaze. "It does absolutely nothing as long as you do nothing too. That's the one and only rule, son. You see him in the corner of your eye, you keep looking straight. When you feel him watching you, you pretend you don't. You don't acknowledge him, you don't engage with him, and you sure as hell don't go looking for him. He's a thing you're only supposed to see by accident. You start making it on purpose, and that's when you get into trouble." "Trouble?" I asked. "What kind of trouble?"
"We don't know,"
the younger ranger chimed in.
"No one's ever been stupid enough to find out. It's just common knowledge. Professional courtesy among those of us who work out here. You leave him alone, and he leaves you alone."
Her voice tense. I left the ranger station with my mind reeling. Their warning was stark and absolute, but they had also given me something else. A validation, and a name. The Upside Down Man, and the smudge in my photos. It was a vertical shape of light. A shape of a man, hanging, and it was him. My camera could see him even when I couldn't. And that's when I made my mistake. My fatal, arrogant mistake. I'm a photographer. My entire life, my entire purpose is to see things, and to capture them. To be told that there was something out there, a real observable phenomenon, that I was supposed to ignore. I just couldn't do that. It was an irresistible challenge, and the ranger's warning was just a dare. I went back into the woods, but this time I was hunting for him. My entire methodology changed. I'd find a spot and wait. Not for an animal to appear, but for that familiar prickling sensation on my skin. The moment I felt it, I wouldn't move my head. I'd keep my eyes locked forward, but I'd raise my camera, aiming the lens not at what I was looking at, but at the periphery. At the space where I felt he was, and I'd shoot. The first photos were chilling. The vertical smudge just grew. It was a brilliant, searing slash of overexposed white light, sharp and defined. It looked like a wound in the fabric of the photograph, a tear through which a sterile, featureless light was pouring. And with every photo I took, the slash grew wider, brighter, and more aggressive. It was like I was annoying it, and it was screaming back at me through my own camera. I became possessed by it. I stopped eating properly. I barely slept. I was fueled by a manic, obsessive energy. I filled memory card after memory card with these impossible images. The creature was always there, just at the edge of my sight, a shimmering, wavering promise. And I kept shooting, trying to get a clearer image, trying to resolve that blinding white light into a discernible form. I was in a deep, mossy canyon. The feeling of being watched was palpable. I raised my camera, aimed it into the periphery, and pressed the shutter. The resulting image on the small LCD screen was pure, blinding white light. A completely blank frame. I tried again. White. I even aimed it at my own feet. And again, it was all white. He had broken it. Or more accurately, he had filled it. My camera could now only see the blinding, featureless light of his presence. It was useless. Any sane person would have stopped then. They would have taken the ranger's warnings to heart and gotten the hell out of there. But I wasn't sane anymore. My obsession had burned through my reason. The loss of my camera just felt like a challenge. And now I would have to use my own eyes. I continued the hunt. I would walk through the woods until I felt the familiar presence. Then I would stop and I would try to see him. I kept my head pointed forward, but I'd strained my eyes to the side, trying to resolve the shimmering, waving shape in my peripheral vision. I tried to hold it, focus on it, force it into clarity. And that's when the smudge moved from my photos to my own vision. It started as a small, barely noticeable floater in the corner of my right eye. A tiny, translucent blur. I assumed it was an eye strain, but it didn't go away. And every time I went on one of my hunts, every time I tried to force my eyes to see the creature directly, the smudge would get a little bit bigger, a little more opaque. It was turning from a translucent blur into a patch of milky white fog. I was in the woods trying to focus on the shimmering shape hanging from a distant branch, and as I strained, I saw the white fog in my own eye physically expand, spreading like a drop of milk in water. With a clarity so profound and so terrifying, it felt like a physical blow. I finally understood what was happening. It was that he couldn't be seen directly. His very nature was to exist at the edge of perception, and by trying to force him into the center, by trying to capture him, first with my camera, and then with my own eyes, I was violating the fundamental rule of his existence, and he was fighting back. He was erasing the very part of my vision that I was using to see him. He was a blind spot, a living, predatory blind spot, and he was growing and feeding on my own sight. The panic that hit me was like anything I had ever known. It was the terror of a man realizing the weapon he has been firing is powered by his own blood. I was deep in a remote wilderness and I was going blind. I ran. It was a clumsy, stumbling, panic flight. I tripped over roots I couldn't see properly, crashing through branches that seemed to come out of nowhere. The white fog in the corner of my eye seemed to pulse and swirl with every frantic beat of my heart. I finally made it back to my truck, my body bruised and scratched, my mind a screaming wreck. I drove out of the forest and I have not been back. That was a month ago. The white patch in my vision hasn't gone away. I've seen 3 different ophthalmologists and even a neurologist. They've run every test imaginable. My eyes, they tell me, are perfectly healthy. There is absolutely nothing physically wrong with them. They think I'm having a complex psychological episode brought on by stress and solitude. I knew it wouldn't be that easy. I thought the connection was through the photos. I thought that they were the anchor. So last week I built a bonfire in my backyard. I took every memory card and every hard drive, every single print I had made of the white slashes, and I burned them. I watched until they were nothing but a pile of melted plastic and gray ash. I felt a sense of relief, an exorcism if I may say. But it didn't work. He's not just in the forest anymore. He followed me home. And he's here with me now as I type this. Not in the room and not in the house, but in the corner of my eye. I'll be sitting here on my couch and I'll get that old familiar prickling sensation, and I'll know, if I let my focus soften, I can see him. A tail wavering upside down, shimmering at the very edge of my vision. Sometimes he's in the corner of the room, and sometimes when I'm outside, he's hanging from a telephone pole. But he's always there. A silent, constant companion. The Rangers were right. The only rule is to ignore him, and now that is my life. I live in a constant state of vigilant denial. I can never turn my head too quickly, and I can never let my eyes wander. I have to consciously, actively not see the thing that is always there. Because I know that if I try to look at him, if I give in to that primal urge to face the thing that is watching me, the white fog in my eye will grow, and there's not much of my vision left to lose. So this is my warning. If you ever find yourself in the deep, quiet places of the world, and you feel a prickling at the back of your neck, and you see something impossible just at the edge of your sight, for the love of God, pretend you didn't. Look away. Keep looking straight ahead. Some things aren't meant to be seen, and they will take everything from you to make sure you can't. It's no secret that, when in need of money, someone is willing to go to extreme lengths. I'm not morally corrupt enough to murder, but I was still desperate to do things close to it. The divorce had been hard on me and I wanted to get out of that house and just live on my own. For that you need money, and sadly my job wasn't paying enough. And I couldn't just go off and wander and change my address so quickly. In retrospect, maybe it wasn't so wise to look for a job on the dark web. They pay the most though, and I didn't want to spend my time caring for some kid or an old lady, only to get paid $10 an hour. I started browsing whatever forum I could find, and filtered my search so that I wouldn't have to kill anyone or sleep with anyone. After a while, I came across offerings of package deliveries and such things. Deliver this to this address, show up to this house, etc., etc. It was alright by me, but I didn't have a car at the time, and I couldn't just walk for miles with suspicious boxes in hand. I finally came across this listing. Museum worker needed, $100 an hour. Temporary exhibition hosted somewhere in the suburbs. I checked the address on Google Maps and found some abandoned warehouse at the edge of town. I'd driven by it a few times, back when the family car was also my car. I thought I could give it a try. Maybe it was some contemporary art stuff, some voodoo statues, or even cursed items. I didn't believe in any of that, so it really wasn't a problem to me. It said I had to be there during the week from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m., and Sundays were off. The exhibition would run for about 3 months. I quickly added up some numbers. $100 an hour for 6 hours a day, for 6 days a week, for 3 months. That would certainly cover for a deposit and some second-hand car. That would be enough to help me get by at least, I figured. I ran through the possibilities of weird implications this ad might have. Maybe the museum was a front for human trafficking, drug dealing, or other illegal activities. I didn't even know why I said maybe. That was surely the case. I just had to be careful and not look too deep into things. Or maybe the exhibition was hosted by some eccentric millionaire who wanted to display his dubious antiques. Either way, $100 is $100. I replied and got an instant response. Next thing I know, I was hired. With the little money that I had, I bought a bike and some headphones to help pass the time. I arrived to the warehouse one Monday at 10 a.m., eager to get the job started and get my money. I wasn't expecting it to be so empty. The warehouse was huge on the inside, but the items displayed were very few. Mostly paintings covering the walls and some wooden statues, all extremely tall. They almost reached the ceiling of the warehouse, and I couldn't really see their faces. All of them were sort of bent down, almost as if they were giants, watching so as not to step on us. Some notebooks were on display too. Most of them had drawings or scribbles. They weren't exactly extraordinary, and I really couldn't tell what I was looking at. I saw some unknown surgical equipment. It looked almost medieval. Next to it, a pair of ordinary scissors. I thought at first that it was ironic, or just a piece of art. But the washed-out lady that led me in there told me that these particular scissors were authentic and extremely important. I couldn't really tell what age the lady was. Her skin was clear and luminous. Based solely off that, I could have guessed she was in her early teens. But her eyes moved around a lot and had a certain darkness that you only gain with age. Contrasting to her face, her hands were wrinkled and stained. Her hair fell in long threads on her back and was tangled towards the end. It almost looked unwashed. The most interesting part consisted in the last 3 items, displayed on the opposing wall to the entrance. If I sat at my desk near the entrance, the wall was almost invisible, hidden in shadows. I didn't understand why the lights were so dim. The lady explained that it contributed to the atmosphere of the exhibition. One of the items was a low, round wooden table. The plaque in front of it read, "The Hunger." The table was chewed and clawed at the edges. I think it used to be a square, but the wood had been bitten off and chewed to the point where the corners were rounded. The teeth marks on the table were definitely human. I figured it must have been some sort of art piece. The other was a pair of shoes. The plaque read, The shoes that walked home. They were old and made of leather, and worn out in impossible places, as if whoever worn them had walked in circles continuously. The last item was an empty pedestal, its plaque read, "Painter. Do not look when occupied." I stared at it a while. Such an interesting concept, I mumbled, noticing the lady's unblinking gaze on me.
Yes.
She replied.
Don't look when it's occupied, though.
How would I know?
You'll see. It's a really easy job. You don't have a lot of duties, and you earn so much money by basically doing nothing. You must understand, we value your discretion and lack of curiosity the most.
Yes, thanks, I responded quickly. Suddenly, I realized I didn't really want her to leave. That didn't stop her from traversing the warehouse and shutting the door behind her, without any other formalities. I was left alone with the, art, and my job was to sit at the desk and greet visitors, sell them tickets. I noticed that the stack of tickets was relatively small. It's almost as if they didn't really expect visitors. As I imagined, the warehouse was at the edge of town and nothing really promoted this exhibition. No one was going to come. I decided I would put on some music and study the paintings. I got up and moved in front of the first, titled My Mother. It showed a beautiful sea landscape, the crystal waves melting into the bright shore. It was the type of scenery you'd find before a storm, so bright and yet so ominous, as if it knew what it awaited. I couldn't find any trace of a woman, though. Right when I was about to move to the next painting, my neck tensed up. It's impossible to describe it. The sudden alarming urge to run. The panic that builds up in your chest. I was afraid to turn around, and yet I hated having my back turned to the room. I took a deep breath. I'll count to 3. 1, 2, 3. I didn't turn around. I kept locking eyes with my mother, afraid to act on the impulse of running back to my desk. After torturous moments where my heart was threatening to jump out of my chest, I did a swift turn and then plunged back to my desk. Phew, I said out loud. This place is creepy as fuck. Why? Because, I don't know, it's just fucking odd. I wouldn't pay money to come here. My throat was dry, it was itching, in the cold air drops of sweat began gathering on my forehead. My eyes darted to various points of the room, to the paintings, to the statues, to its corners. Who had I just spoken to? Who even was that? I stared at the closed entrance door. Who is that? I got no answer. Fuck off, just answer me. I heard you loud and clear. I know that someone is in here. You have to. I began hopelessly. You have to buy a ticket to get in. I heard a clatter in the back of the warehouse. The hunger. The shoes that walked home. The painter. Did the pedestal refer to the one who made the paintings? I stood up and made my way slowly to the back. I kept looking at the floor until I saw the edges of the hunger. In the dim light, I could make out the shadow of the pedestal. And on it, I saw the shadow of a figure. It looked vaguely humanoid, like someone crouched over. I couldn't tell which direction it was facing. I was so cold I stepped back, slowly, the same way I came in. At last, after what felt like billions of years, I sat down on my chair. I spent the remaining time of my shift there, too disturbed to listen to music. At some point, I heard the faint sound of wet footsteps coming from the back. You know when you're little and you begin recognizing the walk of your family members as they're coming up the stairs? How can you distinguish between your younger brother's upbeat walk and your father's slow, heavy steps? These footsteps sounded as if those two patterns were combined, almost like limping. They went on for a few seconds, then faded without reaching a certain destination. I swore to myself that I would quit the next day. However, when I saw the bank transfer that night, I thought it wasn't really a bad job. It's not like I was being chased around or hurt in any way. I just had to sit down. I dreamt, however, of those footsteps reaching me at last. It's Tuesday, and as I'm writing this, I can hear them faintly in the back again. I just hope that they appreciate my discretion. And I wonder if the hunger and the shoes that walked home are connected in some way. But then again, They don't pay me to be curious. This is something I should really be speaking about with a therapist, I know. I would, or I have been, but that's not really an option anymore. In fact, I couldn't tell you how many times I've told this story to various medical professionals. I'm 30 now, and it's been 20 years since it happened, and I just want it to stop. I was a pretty average kid, I think at least. A little weird, but every kid is a little weird. I had an older sister and we fought like two cats. I had a couple good friends, most of whom lived on my street or one street over, and we would meet after school and play until it was time for dinner. My life was fairly ideal. I played soccer, I think. Honestly, I have a lot of trouble remembering much of my childhood. But I do remember that I got a Nintendo DS for my 10th birthday, and we had a big party in the backyard. Practically the whole neighborhood showed up. My birthday was just before school got out for the summer, so the air buzzed with excitement and the evening was warm, and felt more alive than other nights. The grown-ups started a fire in our little fire pit, and they sat around it and drank beer while we ran around. I was allowed to stay up past when I usually went to bed, and the other kids chased fireflies with me and roasted marshmallows until late into the night. I remember going to bed happy, excited for the upcoming summer, and exhausted. I fell asleep quickly. Waking up the day after my birthday, something felt off. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And I hadn't had a nightmare. It wasn't that. I had slept better than I could really ever remember sleeping before. It was late, I realized. That must be it. My mom usually woke me up around 8 if it wasn't a school day. She said it was a good habit to be in the routine of waking up early and starting your day on the right foot. With the light streaming in from my windows and the slightly muggy heat in the room, I figured it was already 10 a.m. or even later. I smiled, sliding out of bed. It must have been one final birthday treat, letting me sleep in. She had let me sleep in the day before too, of course, although on my birthday itself I had wanted to get up as early as possible. "Mom?" I called out into the hallway, poking my head out the door. No answer. I frowned. It was Saturday, so my dad was definitely already at work, but my mom shouldn't be. My sister wouldn't be home either. She had left the night before to spend the night at a friend's house. She was 13 now and allowed to have sleepovers, for which I was internally jealous. I decided she must be out in front of the garden, so I put on a shirt and left my room. I smelled coffee, but there was none left in the pot. There were dishes in the sink too, with remnants of eggs stuck to a pan. It wasn't necessarily alarming, but it was a bit strange. Even on days I slept in, there was always breakfast left over for me. I opened the front door, opening my mouth to call out to my mom, but I instantly froze. Halfway up our walkway was the mailman, and he was on the ground, sprawled out awkwardly on the cement, fresh blood pooled beneath him in a gruesome splatter. I didn't know what to do, and I couldn't move. His limbs were bent at horrible angles, his face pointed away from me. It almost looked like some omnipotent force had lifted him into the air and slammed him back down. The package he must have been delivering laid a few feet away, the cardboard dented and soaked in red. I didn't need any confirmation he was dead. It really wasn't a question. I had never seen a dead person before that, and sometimes my parents had watched horror movies, but that hardly counted. I backed into the house and closed the door behind me. My mind was racing too fast, and my heart felt like it might burst out of my chest. Everything in my body was reeling, so much so that all I could do was move slowly in a faux sense of calm. "Mom?" I called out again into the house, my voice breaking. "Mom? Are you home? Something happened outside." No one answered. The house felt way too quiet. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. I had to brace myself against a wall as I made my way to my parents' room, because I was almost shaking too hard to hold myself up. "Mom?" I pushed open her bedroom door. It creaked, the sound almost deafening against the silence that blanketed the room. Our old gray cat, Gumbo, weaseled her way through the crack and slipped out into the hallway, brushing against my leg on her way. I saw a lump in the bed. For a moment I thought it was just pillows, but then I realized it couldn't have been. The bed was made and the pillows were all accounted for. "Mom, are you asleep?" It came out as a whisper, even though it wasn't like I wasn't trying to wake her up. I wanted her awake. Badly. I think I just somehow already knew. Something was hanging in the air. This heaviness, like the whole world had been blanketed in a thing that was empty, hot, and dead. And the desert popped into my head, a place that was so far away from everything and completely devoid of any life. When I pulled back the covers, the shock washed over me like an electric zap. Every one of my veins and bones and muscles felt 20 degrees hotter than they should have been. There was blood everywhere. I could barely see any section of the sheets that wasn't soaked in it. It looked like the cherry juice we sometimes made from the tree in our backyard, squashing the berries with our hands and laughing as the sticky syrup trickled down our wrists. Her eyes were open. Her mouth was open wide too, like she was about to scream. I gagged, stumbling backwards, almost falling down. My legs felt like they wouldn't work anymore. I was in a daze as I stumbled back to the kitchen. The eggs on the pan seemed like they were mocking me now. I knew my parents had told me what to do in an emergency, but all of that was gone from me now. This didn't feel like an emergency. It felt more like a horrible nightmare. I pinched myself on the arm just in case. The neighbors, that was it. I was supposed to call my neighbors. The number was on a sticky note next to the phone. My fingers shook as I dialed the number. They picked up after 3 rings that felt like they took 1 year each. I heard a sort of crackling sound like someone was moving the phone around.
Hello?
Hi. I cleared my throat, trying to get rid of the lump firmly lodged at the back of my tongue. This is, Jackson from next door. I heard some sort of giggle, a choked one, like they were trying to hold it back, and then some hushed whispering.
Hi, Jackson.
The voice said. I assumed it was the mother, Mrs. Winston.
Is everything alright? Can I help you with something?
Something happened. My mom.
Oh, honey.
Mrs. Winston said, her tone gentle, but something about it felt deeply off. My stomach twisted.
Why don't you head on over here? We'll figure out what's going on together.
Okay. I remember hanging up before she said anything else. Something about her voice was very unnerving to me. Still, I didn't know where else to go. I slipped out the back door so I wouldn't have to walk past the mailman, Gumbo watching me go. I knocked on the neighbor's door, and there was no answer. I knocked again, and still nothing. I stepped into the flower beds and peered into the windows. Someone was lying on the couch, their head tilted back like they were staring up at the ceiling. For a moment, that was what I thought was happening, until I saw that their chest was open like a patient on a surgery table. All guts and organs and blood. So much blood. It was Mr. Winston in his sweater vest and brown dad shorts. Dead like the mailman. Dead like my mom. Something came over me and I burst through their front door. It was unlocked, which I hadn't really expected, so I went tumbling into the room. Landing on my stomach, my face slammed into the floor. Face to face with Mrs. Winston, who lay dead in front of the phone. Her eyes were wide open, too. There was a fly on one of them, crawling all over, pausing every few seconds to rub its hands together. I had started to cry. It was finally hitting me that this was real and not some dream. I desperately wanted my mom. I scrambled to my feet, nearly throwing up when I realized my face was covered in her blood. I swiped at it with my hands, trying to wipe it away as quickly as possible. Then, instinctively, I licked my lips. Horrified, I braced myself for the coppery taste of the blood on my tongue. But it never came. It was sweet. I hesitated, trembling incessantly, before cautiously raising one of my red fingers to my lips. Sweet. Memories flooded my mind. Memories of baking with my grandmother. The sweet syrup we would sometimes pour into the mixing bowls. It was fucking corn syrup. I ran to my father's work, which was on the other side of town. By the time I got there, I was close to passing out and drenched in sweat. But it had made it a little easier to get here with the road completely devoid of cars. There was some parked on the side of the road or every now and then in the middle of it, but none of them had people in it. Some of them had blood, thick and red and gooey. The nice receptionist that was always at the desk and always gave me candy when my dad brought me in had her head against the computer. Her hair was matted with red liquid, as if someone had ripped out entire chunks of her scalp. Before I could think too hard about it, I wiped my finger across the side of her head and licked it. It was sweet too. I felt like my brain was going to break, like I was standing on the edge of something completely incomprehensible, and I shook the woman. She flopped like a rag doll. I sobbed, shoving her, and she slumped to the ground, her head knocking against the tiles. "Wake up!" I screamed. "I know you're not dead!" She didn't move an inch, just stared, unblinking, her mouth hanging half open. I ran into the room my dad usually worked in, scanning it for his workspace. I couldn't remember where it was, just that it was around halfway back and close to the wall. In every cubicle, someone was dead. Sometimes they looked halfway peaceful, as if they had been caught by surprise, but most of them were eviscerated in one way or another. Entrails hanging out, bones showing, blood sprayed against the walls, even some with faces ripped clean off. It was like something unseeable had swept through the town on a rampage, but all their blood was made of corn syrup. In a brave moment, I even touched one of the organs, something that looked like a strange deflated balloon, and it jiggled, but more like plastic than a human body part. At one point, I swore I heard a giggle behind me. I whipped around, but no one was there. I found my dad at the water cooler, sitting against the wall, cone paper cup still gripped loosely in his hand. He stared straight ahead, blood leaking from his eyes, nose, and mouth. "Dad?" I whispered, grabbing his shoulder. This isn't funny. Please stop." There was a strange look on his face that I could barely make out through the red. Almost like a smile someone would only make if they were trying very hard not to. I walked back home down the middle of the road, balancing on the yellow lines to have something to focus on, because I was fairly certain if I stopped walking I wouldn't start again. When I got there, I climbed into bed and closed my eyes. I really didn't know what else to do. Eventually, after what must have been hours and hours of lying there, I drifted off into a restless sleep. I woke up to someone shaking my shoulder. I screamed, scrambling away from them, immediately wide awake and terrified.
Whoa!
My mom backed away, smiling.
Sorry, buddy. I didn't mean to scare you.
I was breathing hard. I looked her over, clutching my chest. She was completely fine. She looked it, at least. She stood there in a white blouse and blue jeans, her hair tied up like always, her eyes bright and happy. What day is it?" Her smile faded and she frowned a little. It was then that I noticed the smell of bacon wafting in from the kitchen.
It's Sunday, bud. Remember?
2 days after my birthday, so yesterday had been real. What happened yesterday? She placed the back of her hand on my forehead, tutting softly.
Did one of those neighborhood kids you play with get you sick, honey? Do you feel okay?
I dropped it because I didn't know what else to say. I convinced myself maybe I really was sick, and I was so relieved to see her. I didn't want to think about it anymore. I went to eat breakfast, and sitting at the table between my dad and my sister, everything was normal. But when I left the house later that day, I saw it. On the walkway leading up to our house, there was something pink on the pavement. A faint pink stain, like something sweet and red and sticky, had been recently scrubbed away. Like I said, it's been 30 years. I'd been feeling like I'd almost recovered from that incident. I'd asked everyone I knew countless times about the day, but none of them seemed to have any idea what I was talking about. But still, I'd almost let it go, as if it had never happened. Until today. Today, when I walked into my therapist's office, it seemed strangely quiet. There was usually music playing, something soothing and soft. But there were no people at the waiting room or at the front desk. There was no one, just silence. I let myself into Dr. Sheldon's office, completely perplexed, which is when I found her dead on the carpet, her blood splayed across the walls, even dripping from the ceiling. It was crazy, I know that, but I immediately tasted it. It's sweet. I rolled her over and her eyes were open, a strange smile on her face. This time I did something I didn't think to do as a kid. I checked her pulse. She's alive. I don't know what to do. I can't believe they're doing this to me again. Do they think this is funny? I don't want sympathy. I just want someone to tell me that I'm not crazy. I've run through every explanation: exhaustion, hallucination, and even gas exposure. But nothing adds up. I know what I saw in that cave. I know what we heard, and more importantly, what we felt. You can say I'm mistaken, that's fine. Just don't tell me it wasn't real. It was my friend Zoe's idea. She's always had a reckless streak. Urban exploring, off-trail hiking, and night diving. I usually talk her down, but this time, I don't know. Something about the way she described the cave, it made me curious. It's not even on any of the maps, she said. A guy on the geology forum posted coordinates before his account went dead. Said the wind didn't blow the same way down there. I should have said no. We left early, just 2 backpacks, headlamps, spare batteries, and a rope line. No cell signal where we were going. The cave entrance was narrow, more of a seam in the rock than a mouth. You had to slide in sideways, between slabs of limestone to even reach the chamber. The inside was colder than it should have been. Still air, like nothing moved in or out. Zoe made a joke about ancient burial grounds, and I didn't laugh. There was a dampness to the walls, like sweat, not moisture. The rock was wrong too. It looked like it had been scored with something. Thin, deep gouges, inconsistent in pattern. Not pickaxe marks, not natural erosion. It looked almost deliberate. We went deeper. The light from the surface was long gone, and all we had was the thin, white cone of our headlamps. The passage narrowed, then opened into a wide chamber. I remember thinking the ceiling looked too high for how far we'd gone down, like we were standing in a space that shouldn't exist. Zoe moved ahead of me, scanning the walls, and that's when we found it. A bundle of bones tied with what looked like human hair, hanging from the ceiling by a crude length of rope. No carvings and no symbols, just a mass of bones gently swaying. I whispered, "Zoe, I don't think this is abandoned." She didn't respond right away, and when she finally did, her voice was hollow. "This wasn't here in the photos." Photos? She hadn't mentioned any pictures before. I didn't ask. I was honestly too focused on the smell that was suddenly thick in the air. Like meat left in the sun, but a bit sweeter. That's when I heard it. Something scraping stone. Not close and not far. Somewhere in that massive, impossible chamber with us. I turned and, for a second, I thought I saw something move. Long and thin, almost like a shadow peeled away from the wall and slipped out of sight. Zoe was already backing up. Her face had gone pale beneath the headlamp's glow. I grabbed her arm and whispered, "We need to go, now." She didn't argue. We turned, retraced our steps, but the tunnel didn't look the same. The gouges in the walls were deeper now, fresher, some still wet. Zoe started muttering under her breath. I counted it. I counted the turns. I swear I did." I told her to keep moving, keep the rope line in hand, but when I reached for it, there was nothing. The rope was gone, just a frayed end, cut clean. Something had taken it, and it wasn't done with us yet. Zoe was unraveling. Her breaths were fast and shallow, fogging up the inside of her headlamp lens. I grabbed her by the shoulders, more to steady myself than her. "Hey," I said quietly but firmly. "We need to keep our heads. You counted the turns, right? So think, what's next?" She shook her head, eyes wide. I don't know. I counted them, I swear. 3 right and 2 left, slope downward. But this isn't where we came in." I glanced around. The stone felt tighter somehow, angrier. The air had thickened, like the cave was exhaling slowly, and we were breathing in its rot. That smell was stronger now, clotted, sickly sweet. I listened. There, beneath Zoe's frantic breathing. Not hers and not mine. Something deep, rhythmic, a slow drag in and out, not from any one direction, just around us. Embedded in the walls or even beneath them. I shushed her and held my hand out. She went quiet. We both heard it then. Not a growl and not a snarl. Just breath. Like lungs the size of the room, expanding in time with our fear. I scanned the area. "There, look," I whispered. About 10 feet up there was a narrow ledge. Natural rock, slanted inward like a lip above the tunnel mouth. If we could get up there, maybe we could get a better view of the layout, or at least feel like we weren't being watched from every direction. I helped Zoe climb first, boosting her from below. Her boots scraped and kicked loose gravel, and I winced with every sound. My turn was harder. My fingers trembled against the sharp stone, my legs aching from the tension and the cold, but I made it. The ledge was wide enough for us to crouch. Our lights reached further up here. That's when I saw it. A shape just outside the cone of our beams. It was too tall. That was my first thought. Not like a person, like someone had been stretched upright. Arms long, joints sharp, body so thin you could see where the ribs nearly pierced the skin. Its back was turned. Pale, scabbed flesh stretched tight over its frame. Its head scraped the ceiling. It was listening. One long arm curled out and touched the wall, claw tips dragging across it gently, like it was feeling vibrations through the stone. My breath caught. It froze. No sound and no movement. Then its head twisted, the neck bending like a broken branch, until one sunken pupilless socket faced our direction. It didn't blink and it didn't move. Zoe made a noise, something between a whimper and a choked breath, and I grabbed her mouth just in time. The thing tilted its head, its other hand flexed, claws like carved antler tips scraped together. Click, click, click. Then it sank back into the dark, not walking, melting. The way it moved made me feel wrong inside, like gravity didn't apply to it the same way. I didn't realize I was crying until I tasted salt. We sat there for what felt like an hour. Maybe it was minutes. Time felt fake down there. Zoe finally leaned in. Her voice was so quiet I barely heard her. I don't think we found the cave. I think it wanted us to find it." That thought didn't feel paranoid. It felt true. The walls were grooved. The air was still. The bones were arranged. This wasn't some forgotten tunnel. It was a trap, baited with something only the desperate or curious would follow. I pulled out the backup flashlight and checked our gear. Still had a flare, half a bottle of water, no rope, one knife. We couldn't stay up here. Whatever that thing was, it knew now. We had to move. I started to climb back down when I saw something strange in the rock below. Thin lines in stone that looked too symmetrical, almost like script. Not in English and not in anything I recognized. Dozens of little carvings etched into the ledge just below where we sat. Each one a perfect copy of the last. Zoe saw them too. "That looks like the markings near the..." She stopped herself. Near the bone bundle. We both knew it. Below us, the breathing started again. But this time, it wasn't steady. It was excited. I told Zoe to stay. Don't move. Don't make any noise. Don't shine your light unless you hear me call for you. She didn't argue. She nodded with that hollow, hunted look. Her hands gripped the rock until her knuckles went white. I climbed down the ledge and slipped into the corridor on the far side. One we hadn't seen before. It felt older than the rest. The walls here were darker, like the stone itself had been scorched. Not from fire, but from time. Or something older than time. My boots crunched something brittle beneath them, and I didn't look down. The deeper I moved, the warmer it got. Not physically, that's not the right word. It was like the space remembered heat, a stale decaying warmth that stuck to your skin like grease. I turned a corner and found another chamber. This one was smaller, oval-shaped. The walls weren't stone anymore, at least not naturally. They were carved into reliefs, figures I didn't recognize, arranged in circles, each with their head bent toward the center. In the middle of the room there was a pit. I don't know how deep it went. My light couldn't reach the bottom, but I could hear it. Something moving down there. Slow, wet, rhythmic. It didn't echo. I backed out before whatever was down there noticed me. When I returned to the ledge, Zoe was gone. No blood, no drag marks, no scuffle. She was just gone. Except there was a new bone bundle hanging from the rock just below where we had been sitting. Fresh. Not skeletal, not cleaned. Something wet still clung to the twine holding it together. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I couldn't. My body locked up. My mind flooded with one thought that repeated over and over. It took her. My flashlight flickered, not out, just dimmed. The way a dying memory does in the back of your mind when something older pushes forward. I ran. I don't remember the path I took, only that the cave shifted around me. The same hallway split and doubled back. I saw my own footprints over and over again. And then I didn't. There were no footprints, no dust, just smooth stone as if nothing, and no one, had ever walked there before. When I finally collapsed, I was staring up at a patch of sky. Pale morning light filtered through a hole barely large enough to crawl through. Roots hung like fingers. I pulled myself out with everything I had left. I don't remember how I got back to the car or even how I drove. I woke up in my apartment 2 days later, dehydrated and covered in scrapes. Zoe's things were still in the trunk. She's never been reported missing. No records, no digital footprint. It's like she was erased the moment we stepped into that place. Except, yesterday, someone slid something under my door. A strip of pale leather, tied around a bundle of hair. Zoe's hair. I recognized the braid. There were markings burned into that leather, same as the carvings in that cave. I've spent hours trying to match them to anything. Runic scripts, tribal symbology, ancient languages, nothing matches exactly. But one symbol keeps showing up. It looks like a figure bent backward over a ring of thorns. Sometimes it's drawn with antlers, sometimes it has no face, and sometimes it looks like it's smiling. I'm not posting this for clout. I don't care if anyone believes me. I'm posting it because I found something else burned into the other side of the leather. Not in ancient script, but in English. 5 words. You were meant to watch. I haven't slept since, and I'm not sure what I should do. Because sometimes, just before dawn, I hear breathing in the walls. This happened a few years back. I was doing long haul, mostly cross-country routes, the kind that take you through vast stretches of nothing. You know the ones, where the radio turns to static for hours, and the only sign of life is the occasional pair of headlights going the other way, miles apart. I was young and eager for the miles, the money. I didn't mind the solitude, or so I thought. The route I was on took me across a long, desolate stretch of highway that ran between the borders of two large, governmental territories. I don't want to say exactly where, but think big, empty spaces, lots of trees, and not much else. It was notorious among drivers for being a dead zone. No signal, no towns for 100 miles on either side, and prone to weird weather. Most guys tried to hit it during daylight, but schedules are schedules. Mine had me crossing it deep in the night. I remember the feeling, utter blackness outside the sweep of my headlights. The kind of dark that feels like it's pressing in on the cab. The only sounds were the drone of the diesel engine, and the hiss of the air brakes now and then, and the rhythmic thrum of the tires on asphalt. Hypnotic. Too hypnotic. I'd been driving for about 10 hours with a short break a few states back. Coffee was wearing off. The dashboard lights were a dull green glow, comforting in a way, but also making the darkness outside seem even more absolute. My eyelids felt like they had lead weights attached. You fight it, you know? Slap your face, roll down the window for a blast of cold air, crank up whatever music you can find that hasn't dissolved into static. I was doing all of that. It must have been around 2 or 3 a.m. I was in that weird state where you're not quite asleep, but not fully awake either. Like your brain is running on low power mode. The white lines on the road were starting to blur together, stretching and warping, standard fatigue stuff. I remember blinking hard, trying not to focus. That's when I saw it, or thought I saw it. Just a flicker at the edge of my headlights on the right shoulder of the road. Small, low to the ground. For a split second, I registered a shape, vaguely human-like, and then it was gone, swallowed by the darkness as I passed. My first thought, a deer or a coyote, common enough, but it hadn't moved like an animal, and it had been upright. My brain, sluggish as it was, tried to process it. Too small for an adult and too still for an animal startled by a rig. Then the logical part, the part that was still trying to keep me safe on the road, chimed in. You're tired. Seeing things. It happens. And I almost accepted that. I really did. I shook my head and took a swig of lukewarm water from the bottle beside me. I kept my eyes glued to the road ahead. The image, though, it kind of stuck. A small, upright shape, like a child. No way, I told myself. Out here? The middle of nowhere? In the middle of the night? It was impossible. Kids don't just wander around on interterritorial highways. It had to be a trick of the light, a bush. My eyes were playing games. I've seen weirder things born of exhaustion. Shadows that dance and trees that look like figures. It's part of the job when you're pushing limits. I drove for maybe another 5 to 10 seconds, the image fading, my rational mind starting to win. Just a figment. Then I glanced at my passenger side mirror, a habit, always checking, and my blood went cold. Not just cold, it felt like it turned to slush. There, illuminated faintly by the red glow of my trailer lights, receding into the distance, was the reflection of a small figure, standing on the shoulder of the road, exactly where I thought I had seen something. It wasn't a bush. It wasn't a shadow. It was small, and it was definitely standing there, unmoving, as my truck pulled further and further away. My heart started hammering against my ribs. This wasn't fatigue. This was real. There was someone, something back there, and it looked tiny. Every instinct screamed at me. Danger. Wrong. Just keep going. But another voice, the one that makes us human, I suppose, whispered something else. A kid? Alone out here? What if they're hurt? Lost? I fought with myself for a few seconds that stretched into an eternity. The image in the mirror was getting smaller and fainter, and if I didn't act now, they'd be lost to the darkness again. God, the thought of leaving a child out here, if that's what it is. Against my better judgment, against the primal urge to just floor it, I made a decision. I slowed the rig, the air brakes hissing like angry snakes, pulled over to the shoulder, the truck groaning in protest. Put on my hazards, their rhythmic flashing cutting into the oppressive blackness. Then I did what you're never supposed to do with a full trailer on a narrow shoulder. I started to reverse, slowly, carefully, my eyes flicking between the mirrors, trying to keep the trailer straight, trying to relocate that tiny figure. The crunch of gravel under the tires sounded unnaturally loud. It took a minute, maybe two, but it felt like an hour. The red glow of my taillights eventually washed over the spot again, and there it was. A kid. I stopped the truck so my cab was roughly alongside them, maybe 10 feet away. Switched on the high beams, hoping to get a better look, and also to make myself clearly visible as just a truck and not something else. The kid was small, really small. I'd guess maybe 6 or 7 years old. Hard to tell in the glare. They were just standing there on the very edge of the gravel shoulder, right where the trees began. The woods pressed in close on the stretch of road, tall dark pines and dense undergrowth that looked like a solid black wall just beneath the reach of my lights. The kid wasn't looking at me. They were facing sort of parallel to the road, just walking, slowly, like they were on a stroll, completely oblivious to the massive 18-wheeler that had just pulled up beside them, engine rumbling and lights blazing. They were wearing what looked like pajamas, thin, light-colored pajamas in the chill of night. No coat and no shoes that I could see. My mind reeled. This was wrong on so many different levels. I killed the engine. The sudden silence was almost deafening, amplifying the crickets and the rustle of leaves in the woods from a breeze I couldn't feel in the cab. My heart was still thumping, a weird mix of fear and adrenaline and a dawning sense of responsibility. I rolled down the window. The night air had hit me, cold and damp, carrying the scent of pine and wet earth. "Hey!" I called out. My voice sounded hoarse, too loud in the quiet. "Hey kid!" No response. They just kept walking, one small bare foot in front of the other, at a pace that was taking them absolutely nowhere fast. Their head was down, slightly. I couldn't see their face properly. "Kid, are you okay?" I tried again, louder this time. Slowly, so slowly the kid stopped. They didn't turn their head fully, just sort of angled it at a fraction. Enough that I could see a pale silver cheek in the spill of my headlights. Still not looking at me, still ignoring the multi-ton machine idling beside them. A prickle of unease ran down my spine. Not the normal kind of unease. This was deeper, colder. Animals act weird sometimes, but children? A lost kid should be scared, relieved, something. This was nothing. "What are you doing out here all alone?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm and friendly like you're supposed to do with a scared kid, even though this one didn't seem scared at all. "It's the middle of the night." Silence, just the sound of their bare feet scruffing softly on the gravel as they took another step, then another, as if my presence was a minor inconvenience, a background noise they were choosing to ignore. This wasn't right. My internal alarm bells were clanging louder now. My hand hovered near the gear stick. Part of me wanted to slam it into drive and get the hell out of here. But the image of this tiny child, alone, possibly in shock, I couldn't just leave, could I? "Where are your parents?" I pushed my voice a bit sharper than I intended. "Are you lost?" Finally, the kid stopped walking completely. They turned their head just a little more, still not looking directly at my cab, more towards the front of my truck and into the glare of the headlights. I could see their face a bit better now, pale, featureless in the harsh light, like a porcelain doll. Small dark smudges that must have been eyes. No expression. None. Not fear. Not sadness. Not relief. Just blank. An unreadable slate. Then a small voice. Thin like the rustle of dry leaves. Lost. Just that one word. It hung in the air between us. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by a fresh wave of concern. Okay, lost. That's something I can deal with. Okay, kid, lost is okay. We can fix lost. Where do you live? Where are you going? The kid finally, slowly, turned their head fully towards my cab. Towards me. I still couldn't make out much detail in their face. The angle, the light, something was obscuring it, keeping it at a sort of shadowy vagueness despite the headlights. But I could feel their gaze. It wasn't like a normal kid's look, there was a weight to it. An intensity that was deeply unsettling for such a small form. Home, the kid said. That same, thin, reedy voice. Trying to get home. Right, home. Where is home? I asked, leaning forward a bit, trying to project reassurance. Is it near here? Did you wander off from a campsite? A car? There were no campsites for miles and no broken down cars on the shoulder. I knew that. The kid didn't answer that question directly. Instead, they took a small step towards the truck, then another. My hand tensed on the door handle, ready to open it to offer what? A ride? A shelter? I didn't really know. It's cold out here, I said, stating the obvious. You should get in. We can get you warm, and I can call for help when we get to a spot with signal. And my CB was useless, and just static, and my phone had shown no service for the last hour. The kid stopped about 5 feet from my passenger door, still in that pale, thin, pajama-like outfit, barefoot on the sharp gravel. They should be shivering, crying. They were doing neither. Can you help me? The kid asked. The voice was still small, but there was a different inflection to it now. Less flat, a hint of something else, pleading maybe. Yeah, of course I can help you, I said. That's why I stopped. Where are your parents? How did you get here? The kid tilted their head, a jerky, unnatural little movement. They're waiting. At home. Okay, and where's home? Which direction? I gestured vaguely up and down the empty highway. The kid didn't point down the road. They made a small, subtle gesture with their head. A little nod towards the trees, towards the impenetrable darkness of the woods lining the highway. In there, the kid said. My stomach clenched. In the woods? Your home is in the woods? Lost, the kid repeated, as if that explained everything. Trying to find the path. It's dark. Yeah, it's very dark, I agreed, my eyes scanning the tree line. It looked like a solid wall of black. No sign of any path, any habitation, just dense, old-growth forest. The kind of place you could get lost in for days, even in the daylight. Can you come out? The kid asked. Help me look? It's not far. I just can't see it from here. Every rational thought in my head screamed no. Get out of the truck? In the middle of the night? In the pitch black? With this strange child who wanted me to go into the woods? No, absolutely not. But the kid looked so small. So vulnerable. If there was even a tiny chance they were telling the truth, that their house was just in a little way, and they were genuinely lost. I don't think that's a good idea, buddy, I said, trying to sound gentle. It's dangerous in there at night, for both of us. Best thing for you is to hop in here with me. We'll drive until we get signal, and then we'll call the police or the rangers. They can help find your home properly. The kid just stood there, that blank, unreadable face fixed on me. But it's just right there, they insisted, their voice a little more insistent now. Just a little way. I can almost see it. If you just step out, the light from your door would help. My skin was crawling. There was something profoundly wrong with this scenario. The way they were trying to coax me out, the lack of normal emotional response, the pajamas, the bare feet, the woods. I looked at the kid, trying to pierce that strange vagueness around their features. My headlights were bright, but it was just like they absorbed the light rather than it reflected. Their eyes, I couldn't really see their eyes, just stark hollows. I really think you should get in the truck, I said, my voice firmer now. It's warmer in here, and we can figure it out together. The kid took another step closer. They were almost at my running board now. Please, they said, that reedy voice again. My leg hurts. I can't walk much further. If you could just help me a little. Just to the path. My internal conflict was raging. My trucker instincts, honed by years of seeing weird stuff and hearing weirder stories at truck stops, were blaring warnings. But the human part, the part that saw a child in distress, was still there, still arguing. I was tired, so damn tired. Maybe I wasn't thinking straight. Maybe this was all some bizarre misunderstanding. I squinted, trying to see past the kid, towards the tree line they'd indicated. Was there a faint trail I was missing? A flicker of light deep in the woods? No, there was nothing. Just blackness. Solid, unyielding blackness. And then I saw it. It wasn't something I saw clearly at first. It was more like an anomaly. A disturbance in the darkness behind the kid. The kid was standing with their back mostly towards the woods, facing my truck. Behind them, the darkness of the forest was absolute. Or it should have been. But there was something connected to them. Something that stretched from the small of their back, from under their thin pajama top, and disappeared into the deeper shadows of the trees. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, a weird shadow cast by my headlights, hitting them at an odd angle. Maybe a rope they're dragging, a piece of clothing snagged on a branch. I leaned forward, trying to get a clearer view. The kid was still talking, their voice a low, persistent murmur. It's not far, please. Just help me. I'm so cold. But I wasn't really listening to the words anymore. I was focused on that thing behind them. It wasn't a rope, and it wasn't a shadow. It was a tube. A long, dark, thick tube. It seemed to emerge directly from the kid's lower back. Impossibly, seamlessly. It was a dark mat, like a strip of the night itself given form, and it snaked away from the child. Maybe 10, 15 feet before disappearing into the inky blackness between the two thick pine trunks. It wasn't rigid. It seemed to have a slight, almost imperceptible flexibility, like a massive, sluggish umbilical cord, made of a shadow. It didn't reflect any light from my headlamps, it just absorbed it. My breath hitched in my throat. My blood, which had been cold before, now felt like it had frozen solid. This wasn't just wrong, this was impossible, unnatural. The kid was still trying to coax me. Are you going to help me? It's just there. You're so close. My voice, when I finally found it, was barely a whisper. I couldn't take my eyes off that appendage. Kid, what is that behind you? The kid flinched. Not a big movement, just a tiny, almost imperceptible tightening of their small frame. Their head, which had been tilted pleadingly, straightened. The blackness on their face seemed to solidify. What's what? They asked, their voice suddenly devoid of that pleading tone. It was flat again, colder. That thing, I stammered, pointing with a shaky finger. Coming out of your back, going into the woods. What is that? The kid didn't turn to look. They didn't need to. Their gaze, those dark, unseen eyes, bored into me. It's nothing, they said. The voice was still small, but it had a new edge to it. A hardness. You're seeing things. You're tired. They were using my own earlier rationalization against me. No, I said, my voice gaining a tremor of conviction born of sheer terror. No, I'm not. I see it. It's right there. It's connected to you. The kid was silent for a long moment. The only sound was the thumping of my own heart, so loud I was sure that they could hear it. The crickets had stopped. The wind seemed to die down. An unnatural stillness fell over the scene. Then, the kid's face began to change. It wasn't a dramatic movie monster transformation. It was far more subtle and far more terrifying. The blackness didn't leave, but it sharpened. The pale skin seemed to tighten over the bones. The areas where the eyes were, those dark smudges, seemed to deepen, to become more shadowed, more intense, and a flicker of something ancient and utterly alien passed across their features. It wasn't human anger, it was something older, colder, and infinitely more patient, now strained to its limit. The air in my cab suddenly felt thick, heavy, hard to breathe. "Just come out of the truck," the kid said, and the voice, oh God, the voice. It wasn't the small, reedy voice of a child anymore. It was deeper, resonant, with a strange, grating undertone like stones grinding together. It was coming from the small frame, but it was impossibly large, impossibly old. It vibrated in my chest. "Come out now." The command was absolute. My hand, which had been hovering near the gear stick, now gripped it like a lifeline. My other hand fumbled for the ignition key, which I'd stupidly left in. What are you?" I choked, staring at the monstrous thing playing dress-up in a child's form. At the dark, pulsating tube that was its anchor to the shadows. The kid's head tilted again, that jerky, unnatural movement, the expression on its face, if you could even call it that. Contempt, like I was a particularly stupid insect it had failed to swat. And then it spoke in that same terrible, resonant, grinding voice. The words it said are burned into my memory, colder than any winter night. "Why?" It rasped, the sound seeming to scrape the inside of my skull. "The fuck are humans smarter now?" That was it. That one sentence, the sheer cosmic frustration in it, the implication of past encounters, of easier prey, the utter alien nature of it. I didn't think, I didn't plan, I reacted. Primal fear, the kind that bypasses all other higher brain function, took over. My hand twisted the key, the diesel engine roared back to life, a sudden violent explosion of sound in the horrifying stillness. The kid, the thing, actually recoiled. A small, jerky step back, the expression, that awful, tightened, ancient look, intensified. I slammed the gear stick into drive, my foot stomped on the accelerator, the truck lurched forward, tires spinning on the gravel for a terrifying second before they bit into the asphalt. I didn't look at it, I couldn't. I stared straight ahead, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, the whole cab vibrating around me. The truck surged forward, gaining speed with agonizing slowness. For a horrible moment, I imagined that tube thing whipping out, trying to snag the trailer, to pull me back, to drag me into the woods. I imagined that small figure with its ancient, terrible voice somehow keeping pace. I risked a glance in my driver's side mirror. It was standing there, on the shoulder, unmoving. The headlights of my departing truck cast its small silhouette into sharp relief, and behind it, the dark tube was still visible, a thick, obscene cord snaking back into the endless night of the forest. It didn't seem to be retracting or moving. It just was. The thing didn't pursue, it just stood there and watched me go. And that somehow was almost worse. The sheer confidence, the patience, like it knew there would be others, or maybe it was just annoyed that this particular attempt had failed. I drove. I don't know for how long, I just drove. My foot was welded to the floor, the engine screamed. I watched the speedometer needle climb, far past any legal or safe limit for a rig that size on a road that dark. I just didn't care. The image of that thing, that child shape with its dark umbilical to the woods, and that voice, that awful grinding voice, asking its horrifying question was burned onto the inside of my eyelids. I must have driven for an hour, maybe more, at speeds that should have gotten me killed or at the very least arrested, before the adrenaline started to fade, replaced by a bone-deep shaking exhaustion that was more profound than any fatigue I'd ever known. My hands were trembling so violently I could barely keep the wheel straight. Tears were streaming down my face, not from sadness but from sheer, unadulterated terror and relief. When the first hint of dawn started to gray the eastern sky, and my phone finally beeped, indicating a single bar of service, I pulled over at the first wide spot I could find. I practically fell out of the cab, vomiting onto the gravel until there was nothing left but dry heaves. I sat there on the cold ground, shaking, for a long time, watching the sun come up, trying to convince myself that it had been a dream, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. But I knew it wasn't. The detail of that tube, the voice, the question, you don't hallucinate something that specific, that coherent, that utterly alien. I never reported it. Who would I report it to? What would I say? Officer, I saw a little kid who was actually an ancient cosmic horror tethered to the woods by a nightmare umbilical cord, and he got mad because I didn't want to be its dinner. They'd have me locked up, breathalyzed me, drug tested me, sent me for a psych eval. I finished that run on autopilot, dropped the load, drove my rig back to the yard, and I quit. I told them I was burned out and needed a break. They tried to convince me to stay, offered me different routes and even more pay. I just couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that kid, that tube, those woods. Every dark road felt like a trap. I found a local job, something that keeps me home at night. I don't drive in remote areas anymore if I can help it, especially not at night. I still have nightmares. Sometimes when I'm very tired, driving home late from somewhere, I'll see a flicker at the edge of my vision, on the side of the road, and my heart will try to beat its way out of my chest. I don't know what that thing was. An alien, a demon, something else. Something that doesn't fit into our neat little categories. All I know is that it's out there, and it's patient, and it seems to have learned that its old tricks aren't as effective as it used to be. Why the fuck are humans smarter now? That question haunts me. It implies they weren't always. It implies that once upon a time we were easier. That maybe, just maybe, people like me, tired alone on dark roads, used to step out of the cab when asked and were never seen again. So, if you're ever driving on one of these long, lonely stretches of road, deep in the middle of the night, and you see something you can't explain, maybe just keep driving. Maybe being smarter now means knowing when not to stop, knowing when to ignore that little voice telling you to help, because what's asking for help might not be what it seems. Stay safe out there, and for God's sake, stay on the well-lit roads. Last year, I worked at a laundromat near my parents before I moved away to college. I saw the advert in the window when I was shopping with my dad, and I figured it was an easy way to earn some money. The woman who ran the laundromat interviewed me, and I started the same day, but not before she introduced me to her daughter, who also worked there. She was called Mia, was really petite and really odd. The first time I met her, she immediately said, "Hey, can you do this?" Then she did this weird thing with her eyes that made them vibrate. It's hard to explain. They were like rapidly moving side to side, and the whole time she had this toothy smile on her face, like it was the most amazing thing in the world. Mia must have been only a year or two younger than me, so still in her teens, but her behavior seemed really juvenile and kind of try-hard. Anyway, I just figured she was trying to break the ice in her own way, so just kind of rolled with it. I got through the rest of the day with just small talk and didn't think too much of it. And I was barely a week or two into the job when I first caught her hiding inside one of the machines. She'd somehow managed to climb up and curl herself up in one of the big tumbler dryers. I wouldn't have even noticed had I not walked past her and heard her giggling inside the drum, scaring the absolute shit out of me. "What are you doing?" I asked, annoyed. She was dicking around whilst I was working my ass off, her large eyes watching me in the darkness, her legs pressed up against her flat chest. "I'm just cleaning it." "Right. Okay." I literally cleaned the lint out of the machine just this morning, so I didn't buy her bullshit for 1 minute. Anyway, she climbed out of the machine like a creepy gymnast shortly after, earning a few strange glances from some of the customers, but no one was hurt. The next time was worse. About 3 days later, I was helping this young mom set up a load of laundry after her machine broke in her apartment. It was her first time in a laundromat, so she didn't really know where to start, and I had brought her kid along too, although she wasn't doing a very good job of keeping an eye on him. I had just finished walking her through the different powders, prices, and settings when I heard that same eerie, echoing giggle again towards the back of the store, only this time it was followed by a child's laughter. As soon as I heard the sound, I had a weird hitching feeling in my gut. Although I'd only known Mia for about a week, I knew leaving a random kid with her would be like leaving them unattended by an open electrical socket. Anything could happen. "I'm sorry, I'll be right back," I said to the mom, leaving her to load her washing into the machine. Most of the machines in the laundromat were 10-kilogram washing machines. We also had a few larger 18 kilograms and one massive front-loaded 33-kilogram machine, used for washing duvets and the like, which Mia's mom had affectionately christened the Beast. The whole time I'd worked there, I'd never seen it once, yet I found Mia half inside the Beast that day, playing with the kid. Her bottom half was inside the drum, elbows resting on the rubber seal with the door open, as she handed quarters to the boy. She was pulling funny faces and doing that weird thing with her eyes again, making him laugh. The sight made me freeze for a second, wondering what the hell she was playing at. I heard the boy ask her, "What do I do?" "Just close the door," she explained, "and press the big red button." It was only then I realized she was trying to bribe the kid into locking her inside the machine and switching it on. "Mia!" I hissed, hurrying through the maze of machines to confront her. "But what will it do?" the little boy asked. "I'll go for an exciting ride." I finally reached the door and grabbed it, putting an end to this madness. Both Mia and the kid looked annoyed, like I'd interrupt a great game of theirs. "What did you think you were doing?" I snapped. "It was just a little fun." The boy laughed as Mia tousled his hair before he finally scampered off back to his mother, who was still piling dirty underwear into the machine at the other end of the store, oblivious. "Hey, just chill," Mia said, sensing my anger as she slid out of the machine. He wasn't really going to do it. I shook my head and walked away, knowing the kind of shit my own little brother would do for a few dollars. Later that day, Mia's mom came out of her office to check on us, and I thought about ratting Mia out right there and then. But the way she seemed to always dote on her strange daughter, like the sun never shone out of her ass, made me pause. Why would she even believe me over her own flesh and blood? After all, I hadn't even made my first paycheck yet, and I really needed this money. That thought alone ultimately made me decide to just let it slide. I didn't know how much I'd come to regret not bailing right then and there. A few days later, Mia and I were both working the evening shift. It was near closing time, and the place was dead. I was just putting a damp sock in the lost and found basket when she appeared at my shoulder and asked, "Do you like me?" I frowned and focused on the sock. "Yeah, of course." I knew I'd over-egged the lie as soon as it left my mouth, but I wanted to keep the job, at least until college started. "Then why do you never look me in the eye?" I forced myself to turn away from the basket and finally face her. "What do you mean?" "Do you like me?" Her face had a sudden seriousness to it. Whether I'd seen her before, she'd always had the ghost of a smile on her face, and a playful look in her eye, but now she looked almost disappointed in me somehow. My mouth felt dry as I croaked out a yes. "Liar!" I felt my awkwardness switch to fear as she did that weird vibrating thing with her eyes again, only this time they seemed to pull mine in. It was like I had tunnel vision all of a sudden. I tried to take a step back, but my legs felt cut off from the brain. Instead, they followed her as she slowly walked backward towards the row of machines lining the rear wall. Panic set in as I realized she was leading us straight towards the Beast. The playful look on her face returned as she sensed my fear. "Don't worry," she said, her voice sounding like it was at the end of a tunnel. "It's just a little fun." Her vibrating eyes never left mine as we reached the huge machine. She opened the door at her back and started to climb in. In my peripheral vision, I saw her arms and legs contort in a nightmarish way. The whole time her head stayed fixed in space, her eyes now the center of my universe. Once she crawled inside, her voice called to me from the darkness of the drum. "Close the door and switch it on. Wash cycle, max spin." I felt powerless to obey. I watched as my arms closed the door and programmed the cycle. The panic inside me rose, making me feel like I'd vomit if I still had control over my own body. As my fingers hovered over the start switch, I held on to the last sliver of hope. The cycle wouldn't start without any money, and I was fresh out of quarters. Yet, as she ordered me to start the machine and the button clunked home, and the door locked without any complaints, I realized she had already preloaded the coins. This sick creep had planned this right from the start. I heard the machine fill with water and felt tears spring into my eyes as I realized I was about to watch someone drown to death in the worst way possible. The drum part filled to her chin, but Mia never took her eyes off me, not even as the machine started to spin. I don't know if it was the trance that she put me in, or if her neck wasn't human, but her head filled that thick glass door and never rotated an inch. I remember watching a nature documentary on birds of prey and how owls remain stable in flight to better track their prey, and Mia's face reminded me exactly of that. Just this pale, big, black-eyed face staring back at me through the glass. She must have forced me to stand like that, watching her drown for a good half hour, because I remember the floor starting to shake as the machine hit its spin cycle. The drum whirled about her horrid face like an optical illusion, pulling me in and never letting me go, until finally, the sudden surge of power caused the lights overhead to flicker. My eyes lost sight of hers for a moment in the darkness, and I blinked for the first time in what felt like an eternity. The top halves of my eyeballs felt like dry, gritted glass as they finally slid down on the tears collecting below. Suddenly in control of my own body again, I flung a hand over my eyes and looked away. I heard Mia calling to me from the machine, trying to get me to look at her again, but I wasn't falling for it. My brain felt foggy and my legs felt drunk. For a split second I thought about trying to switch the beast off before realizing it wouldn't work mid-cycle, and it only released the true monster currently trapped inside of it. Whatever Mia was clearly wasn't human, and I dreaded to think of what she had planned next for me. I remember half running, half stumbling past her mom's office, praying it wouldn't open in case she tranced me too. Thankfully I managed to stifle my sobs and it stayed shut, leaving me to slip out of the laundromat and into the night. I never went back again. When my parents asked me why I quit, I told them I needed to focus my time on my studies instead, which seemed to shut them up. A couple of days ago, I finally mustered up the courage to look at the laundromat on Google Maps Street View. I don't know if I was hoping to see if the store had closed or if anyone had left any bad reviews complaining about the creepy teenage girl that worked there, but I found neither. Instead, all I saw was what looked like another ad for her hire in the window, and the silhouette of a small woman with bleached blonde hair staring out the window. I didn't know if that was Mia or just a bored customer, but I closed that browser window really quick. I'd hoped telling my story on her would somehow help me to process it, but now I've told it, I don't really feel any better. I still can't use the dorm laundromat because every time I close the machine door, I see her creepy owl-like face staring back at me. I'm either hand-washing or buying new clothes these days, which is breaking my bank account. I think I need help. Maybe I should see someone.